Hi guys, tonight we step into a world older than cities, older than writing. You are standing near a small fire on a cold night about 30,000 years ago. Smoke rises in a lazy ribbon. A branch pops in the flames and a few people shift closer to the warmth. They wear animal skins, they carry stone tools, and they live at a pace that today would seem almost impossibly slow. But this is not an empty world. It is full of tracks, voices, routines, the first fragile signs of something deeply human. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you are listening from somewhere in the world, leave a comment with your location and your local time. Now, dim the lights. Before you go any farther, it helps to understand the world you're entering. Around 30,000 years ago, Ice Age Europe and parts of Eurasia were cold, open and demanding. Glaciers covered vast regions, mammoths and reindeer moved across the land, and small bands of humans followed the seasons with patient attention. They did not have cell, writing, or houses in the modern sense. Their lives were built from hide, bone, wood, stone, and memory. They survived by noticing everything, where the animals fed, where the flint could be found, which plants could soothe pain, which paths were safe in winter. In that world, the mind was not just a private place, it was a survival tool. And yet, even there, you sense something else. Survival alone never fully explains people. A hunter can sharpen a spear and still carve a line into bone. A mother can gather berries and still hum a tune to a child. A group can spend the day searching for food and still gather at night to share a pattern. A memory, that is where your journey begins, in the space between necessity and meaning. The trait you are following tonight is quieter than a thunderstorm. It slips into the world almost unnoticed. It appears in gestures, in symbols, in repeated sounds, in the strange human habit of making life into a story. Historians still debate whether this trait first emerged as language grew more complex, or whether the need to tell stories actually helped a language become what it is. Either way, the two seem to have grown up together. You sit down near the fire and watch the people around you. Their faces are lit from below, which gives them a softer, older look. The kind of look that makes everyone seem both familiar and mysterious. One person leans forward to add dry grass. Another rubs warmth into their hands. A child falls asleep with the easy trust of someone who knows the group will keep watch through the night. There is a smell of smoke, fat, earth, and fur. It is not a clean smell, but it is the smell of being alive, and in that glow. You can already sense the beginning of a habit that still lives in modern bedroom, around dinner tables, in podcasts, in novels, and in sleepy late-night videos like this one. Humans do not merely experience the world, they retell it. This retelling may have started long before writing. Researchers continue to question exactly when symbolic thinking became widespread, because the evidence is scattered and often delicate. A carved object here, a painted cave wall there, a burial with unusual care, a bead made from shell far from the sea. Each clue is small, but together they suggest a mind that was doing more than reacting. It was imagining, it was remembering, it was connecting one thing to another. And once humans could connect things in that way, they could also connect events, people, places, and fears into patterns that made the world feel less random. You might think of this as the earliest form of mental comfort. Today, if you cannot sleep, you might reach for music or a familiar story. In the Ice Age, there was no screen glowing at the end of the bed, no app quietly offering a distraction. There was only the fire, the night, and the voices of people who understood that a repeated tale could soothe the restless mind. Some historians suggest that storytelling first served practical needs, teaching where to hunt or how to avoid danger, while others disagree and argue that its earliest purpose was social, meant to bond the group and calm fear. Perhaps it was both. Perhaps the human mind never saw a reason to separate usefulness from comfort. As the flames soften and settle, you begin to notice the small details that matter: the rhythm of breathing, the soft scrape of a stone tool being set down, the low murmur of speech. There is an elder whose hands move as they speak, drawing a shape in the air, maybe describing an animal, maybe a place, maybe a warning, maybe a joke that survives only because someone laughs or someone laughs at the right moment. And that may be part to the secret human trait you're following. Humans do not merely say facts, they animate them, they make them memorable, they give them a pulse. The old night around you is patient. It does not rush. Neither do the people beside the fire. They know, without needing to say it, that the dark can be managed 1 hour at a time. One person tells of a track seen near the river. Another adds what the track meant last season. Someone else remembers a place where the wind was gentler, where the ground stayed dry. Those small exchanges carry survival, but they also carry belonging. They tell everyone who is trusted and who remembers. And if you listen closely, beyond the practical talk, beyond the little instructions and reminders, you may hear the first shape of narrative. Not a polished tale, not anything written down, just the ancient impulse to order experience into a beginning, a middle, and a feeling of meaning. You went here, you saw this happened after that, we learned, we survived, tomorrow we will go again. That structure, simple as it is, remains with you now. You hear it in bedtime stories, in documentaries, in family memories, in the way people explain their lives to themselves. It is one of the oldest comforts we have. So you stay by the fire a little longer, feeling the warmth on your face and the cold on your back, noticing how the contrast itself seems to sharpen your awareness. Around you, the night opens wide above you. The stars are unbothered and bright below you. The ground is hard and ancient. And in the middle of it all is a small human circle, held together by attention, by memory, and by the power of telling one another what the world means. That power has never really gone away. It still moves through us every day, whenever we try to make sense of what has happened, whenever we offer comfort, whenever we turn a moment into a story someone else can carry home. The fire behind you slowly fades into the distance as your journey continues, but the warmth stays with you. It lingers in your memory like the echo of a familiar voice. Ahead of you rises the dark entrance of a cave, its opening framed by rough stone polished smooth by thousands of years of wind. Rain and careful footsteps. The air becomes cooler with every step. Outside, the night carries the scent of damp grass and pine. Inside, the smell changes to earth, mineral, and faint traces of old smoke that have settled into the rock over countless seasons. Before entering, it helps to understand why caves mattered so much to people living 30,000 years ago, contrary to popular imagination. Most Ice Age people did not spend every day living deep inside caves. Many groups travelled frequently and built temporary shelters from wood, bone, hides, and whatever the landscape provided. Caves served many purposes. They offered protection during harsh weather, places for occasional gatherings, and sometimes locations that held special importance beyond simple shelter. Mainstream archaeological evidence shows that many famous painted caves were likely visited repeatedly over long periods rather than continuously occupied as everyday homes. You step carefully across the uneven floor. Every footfall produces a quiet scrape that seems louder than it should. The cave has its own way of listening. Water drips somewhere in the darkness with steady patience. The sound repeats every few seconds, like a slow clock that has been ticking for thousands of years. A small torch burns ahead, casting a soft orange glow across the walls. The light flickers so gently that the shadows appear to breathe. You notice that the rock surface is far from flat. It rises and dips in natural curves. Someone long ago looked at these curves and saw possibilities instead of obstacles. As you move closer, the first painted figures emerge from the stone. There is a bison with powerful shoulders. Nearby, a horse stretches forward as if caught in mid-stride. A mammoth curves across another section of wall. The colours are simple but surprisingly rich. Black charcoal, red ochre, yellow earth. Every mark was made with extraordinary patience. You pause. Even after tens of thousands of years, the painting still seems strangely alive. Some artists cleverly use the natural bulges of the cave wall to give animals a sense of movement and depth. When firelight dances across the surface, muscles seem to shift beneath painted skin. Heads appear to turn, legs almost begin to walk. Today we enjoy animated films with millions of digital images. Yet these ancient painters discovered that flickering light itself could create the illusion of motion. Scholars remain divided on the exact purpose of these paintings. Some believe they were connected to hunting rituals. Others argue they marked important stories, memories, or sacred traditions. Still others suggest they represented teaching tools for younger members of the group. Like many mysteries from deep prehistory, the truth may include several of these ideas at once. You notice something curious. Very few paintings show ordinary daily chores. Nobody seems interested in illustrating someone cleaning animal hides or collecting firewood. Those activities certainly filled much of everyday life. Instead, the walls celebrate animals, movement, mystery, and moments that seem larger than ordinary existence. That choice feels surprisingly familiar. Modern people rarely fill photo albums with pictures of themselves folding laundry. Instead, they capture birthdays, holidays, sunsets, and adventures across 30,000 years. The human mind still seems drawn toward moments that feel meaningful rather than merely routine. The torchlight continues to sway. Your eyes slowly adjust to the darkness until you notice details that were invisible at first. Tiny engraved lines surround some of the paintings. Dots appear beside certain animals. Handprints emerge from the shadows. One hand catches your attention. Someone placed their palm against the stone and blew red pigment around it, leaving a clear outline after removing the hand. The person is long gone. Their name is unknowable. Their language has vanished. Every friend they ever had disappeared many thousands of years ago, yet their hand remains. It is one of the quietest greetings in history. For a moment you instinctively compare your own hand with the ancient outline. The size is not so different. The fingers look familiar. The proportions feel unmistakably human. Researchers continue to question whether these handprints represented signatures, participation in ceremonies, family identity, or something entirely different. Whatever their purpose, they create an emotional bridge across unimaginable stretches of time. Someone wanted to leave evidence that they had been here. Perhaps not so different from writing your name in wet sand, except with much better long-term results. The deeper you walk, the quieter everything becomes. Even your breathing seems softer. A child walks beside an older member of the group. The elder points toward one painted animal after another. No written lesson exists. No textbook waits on a shelf. Knowledge travels through gestures, spoken words, and shared attention. You begin to understand that memory itself is becoming a technology. Stone tools shape the physical world. Stories shape the invisible one. Without written records, every generation depends upon careful teaching. Every successful hunt, every dangerous valley, every safe spring, every unusual animal migration lives inside someone's mind before passing into another person's memory. The cave helps make those memories stronger. Images stay with people. Perhaps that is why the paintings matter so much. A painted horse can spark an entire conversation. A carved mammoth may remind listeners of a difficult winter. One simple image may unlock dozens of stories. You continue along the winding passage until the ceiling lowers. Here the torchlight reveals another surprise. The artist did not simply paint wherever space was available. Many images occupy locations that require deliberate effort to reach. Some chambers lie deep inside cave systems where darkness becomes complete without artificial light. Creating art there demanded planning. Someone had to gather fuel for torches, someone had to prepare pigments, someone had to spend valuable hours painting instead of hunting or gathering food. That alone tells you something important. This work mattered enough for the community to support it. It was not merely decoration. Outside, survival always demanded attention. Inside, another kind of nourishment quietly took shape. Perhaps nourishment for memory, perhaps nourishment for identity, perhaps nourishment for the imagination that allows humans to see more than what stands immediately before them. The flames crackle gently as a small group settles near the painted wall. Nobody seems hurried. They observe the images with calm familiarity. One person traces the outline of an animal without actually touching the stone. The silence feels comfortable, not empty, simply shared. You realize that this cave is more than shelter. It's almost a conversation stretching across generations. One person paints, another remembers. A child asks, an elder answers. Years pass. The painting remains. Another child arrives. The conversation continues. You smile quietly to yourself because, in a strange way, you have joined it too, 30,000 years later. You are still looking at the same walls, asking many of the same questions. Why did they paint? What were they thinking? What did they hope someone else would understand? The cave offers no final answers, only gentle echoes, and perhaps that is fitting. The secret human trait you are following is not only the desire to survive, it is the quiet wish to leave behind meaning that another mind can discover long after your own footsteps have faded away. As you turn toward the cave entrance once more, cool air brushes across your face beyond the opening. Dawn has not yet arrived. The stars still shimmer above the sleeping landscape. Behind you, the painted animals remain patient in the darkness, waiting as they always have for the next curious traveller, willing to pause, breathe slowly, and listen to stone that has been telling its silent stories for 30,000 years. You leave the painted animals behind, though they do not quite leave you. Their shapes remain in your mind as you move toward another chamber, smaller and lower, where the air feels still enough to hold a whisper. The torchlight bends around the uneven walls. Your shadow stretches beside you, thin and wavering. And for a moment it seems like another traveller has joined the walk. Nothing here is loud. Even the cave seems to understand that old things should be approached gently. Before you look closely at the marks ahead, it helps to understand the materials of this ancient world. Around 30,000 years ago, people made colour from what the earth provided. Red ochre, a natural iron-rich pigment, was one of the most widely used substances in prehistoric art and ritual. Charcoal gave black, clay and minerals offered yellows, browns, and softer tones. These were not paints in the modern sense, ready in little tubes with cheerful labels and suspiciously convenient caps. They had to be found, ground, mixed, carried, and protected. Every colour required effort. You crouch near a flat stone where traces of red dust cling to shallow grooves. Someone has crushed ochre here, pressing it down with another stone until powder gathered in small uneven piles. You can almost hear the soft scraping rhythm. Stone against mineral, hand against tool, breath moving slowly in the cool air. The work would have stained the fingers, the palms, perhaps the clothing. It would have left a faint earthy smell, dry and metallic, like rain touching iron soil. Nearby, the wall is covered with hands, not one hand, not two, but many. Some are clear and wide, some are small, some overlap, some are missing fingers, or appear to, which has led to many careful arguments among modern researchers. A few hands seem delicate, with narrow wrists. Others look strong and broad. Together they create a crowd without faces. No eyes look back at you, no mouths speak. And still, the wall feels full of presence. You lift your own hand near one of the ancient outlines, not touching it, only hovering close enough to feel the cold breath of the stone. The similarity is startling. A human hand is such an ordinary thing. You see your own hands every day, opening doors, holding cups, scrolling through glowing rectangles when you absolutely promised yourself you were going to sleep 10 minutes ago. But here, in this cave, the hand becomes something else. It becomes evidence, it becomes a message, it becomes a bridge. Researchers continue to question why some Ice Age people made hand stencils so often. One interpretation is that they were signatures, quiet marks of identity left by individuals who wanted to say, "I was here." Another view suggests they were part of group rituals, perhaps marking belonging, age, memory, or spiritual experience. Some scholars suggest that missing fingers in certain stencils may represent a kind of symbolic code, while others argue they may simply result from fingers being bent down during the spraying of pigment. The cave, being very old and apparently rather private, does not clarify. You imagine the process. A person presses their hand against the wall. Another person chews or mixes red pigment, then blows it across the skin through a hollow bone or directly from the mouth. The pigment spreads in a soft cloud. It lands on stone. It settles around the fingers. The hand pulls away. Warm flesh leaving behind its cool outline ere the body moves on. The mark remains. There is something deeply tender about that. The person did not paint the hand itself. They painted the space around it. The image is made by absence. It shows where a living body once blocked the colour from reaching stone, a shadow made permanent. You sit back on your heels and let the quiet settle. This is one of the strange gifts of prehistory. It rarely gives you a full story, it gives you traces, and then it waits while your imagination does what human imagination has always done. It fills the silence with possible meaning. The small chamber smells of damp rock and old smoke. Somewhere above, a drop of water slides down a crack and falls into a shallow pool. The sound is soft, but in the darkness it seems important. The torch flame makes the red hands flicker as though they are breathing in slow sleep. You notice that these marks do not show animals, tools, or landscapes. They show contact, skin to stone, person to place, human to world. That may be one reason they feel so powerful. They do not require translation. A horse painted on a wall might raise questions about species, hunting, myth, and season. A hand says something simpler. Someone stood here. Someone reached out. And this reaching out may be part of the secret trait itself. Humans seem unable to pass through the world without trying to leave signs of themselves behind. A footprint in mud, a name carved into wood, a message folded into a book, a photograph kept in a drawer, a little heart added to a text message. Because apparently even advanced civilization still depends on tiny symbols of reassurance. It is all part of the same ancient impulse to be seen, to be remembered, to say softly, "This moment mattered because I was here." The ochre tells its own longer story too. Mainstream archaeology shows that ochre was used by humans and earlier human relatives for many thousands of years before the great cave paintings of Ice Age Europe. It appears in places far apart, sometimes associated with body decoration, tools, burials, or symbolic activity. This means the attraction to colour, especially red, may run very deep in the human sphere. Red could suggest blood, life, warmth, danger, earth, sunset, or something we can no longer name. Its meaning probably changed from group to group, but its importance seems difficult to dismiss. You imagine a person rubbing ochre onto skin before a gathering, another marking a tool handle, another placing pigment near a body prepared with care. None of this needs to be dramatic. In fact, it feels quieter if it is not. Just people treating certain moments as worthy of attention. People setting apart the ordinary from the meaningful. The chamber grows darker as the torch burns lower. The group around you seems calm. Someone laughs under their breath, someone else coughs softly. A child reaches toward the wall. then is gently guided back before touching the pigment. Even in this old world, apparently, children needed reminders not to poke priceless cultural heritage. Some things never change. Oh, the thought is amusing. And then it fades gently into the cave air. You follow the line of handprints deeper along the stone. They seem almost like a procession. Not a march, not a command, but a gathering of quiet witnesses. Each one was made in a moment that must have felt alive and immediate. A hand pressed to cold rock, breath full of pigment, a slight pause, then the reveal. Perhaps there was wonder in that reveal. Perhaps the maker smiled. Perhaps everyone had seen it many times before, yet still felt the small magic of it. That is another human trait that has lasted rather well. We repeat meaningful acts even when we know exactly how they work. Candles on birthdays, rings in ceremonies, flowers at graves, hands wave through windows. We understand the mechanics, and still the gesture matters. As you finally turn away, the red hands remain behind you, open and silent. They do not explain themselves, but they do not need to. They have already done something extraordinary. They have carried human presence across 30,000 years into this quiet moment with you, and as your steps echo back toward the wider passage, you feel the lesson resting lightly in your mind. The ancient secret is not only that humans tell stories, it is that humans mark the world so stories will have something to hold on to. A wall, a colour, a hand, a trace, a little piece of meaning left behind for someone, someday, to notice in the dark. You leave the red hands behind, and the passage slowly opens into a wider space where the cave mouth is visible again. The outside world waits in a pale grey hush. Morning has not fully arrived, but the darkness is thinning. Cold air slips in from the entrance and brushes your face, carrying the smell of wet grass, ash, and distant animals. The fire from the night before has collapsed into a low bed of embers, breathing softly beneath a skin of white ash. You step out beneath the open sky, and the world feels enormous. There are no roads here, no signs, no written names for rivers, hills, or hunting grounds, no scratched map folded in a pocket. The people around you move through a landscape held together by memory. Every ridge has a story. Every stream has a warning. Every stand of trees might be remembered because someone once found shelter there, or because someone once failed to return from beyond it. In a world before writing, memory is not a hobby, it is infrastructure. The group begins to stir. Someone lifts a bundle of tools wrapped in hide. Someone else checks the edge of a stone blade with a careful thumb. A child sits near an older woman, rubbing sleep from their eyes while listening to a low stream of words. You do not understand the language. Of course, its sounds are lost to time, and nobody left a convenient phrase book, which is inconsiderate but understandable under the circumstances. Still, the rhythm feels familiar. There is repetition, emphasis, a pause where a listener is meant to remember. Long before clay tablets or ink on papyrus, humans carried knowledge in voices. This is one of the great realities of early human life. Archaeologists can uncover tools, bones, hearths, pigments, and shelters, but the spoken world vanishes almost completely. Yet it must have been vast. People needed words, gestures, songs, and repeated tales to pass along routes. Seasons, dangers, skills, family ties, and social rules. The oldest libraries were not buildings, they were living minds. You follow, as the group walks away from the cave, down a slope where frost still clings to low plants. The ground crunches deeply beneath your feet. The morning is blue and silver, far off. Birds begin calling from scrubby trees, their notes thin in the cold air. The group moves with quiet purpose, not hurried, not lazy. They know the land because it has been told to them over and over. A younger hunter points toward a line of hills. An elder corrects the direction with a gentle motion of the hand. No one seems offended. In this world, Correction is not an insult, it is how people keep breathing. You notice how often information comes wrapped in little scenes, instead of simply pointing and saying, "Go there." Someone describes what happened there. A herd passed that valley when the moon was thin. A storm came from that ridge after the birds fell silent. Water remained beneath the ice near the stones shaped like sleeping animals. Knowledge becomes easier to carry when it has images attached to it. That is still true today. You might forget a dry instruction, but you remember the story of how someone learned it the hard way. Humanity has always enjoyed a lesson more when somebody else has already suffered the inconvenience for us. A small laugh passes through the group as one person imitates the awkward movement of an animal. Shoulders hunched, head bobbing. The others recognize it immediately. The imitation is funny, but it is also useful. It teaches the gait, the warning sign, the moment before flight. Comedy and education sit together in the grass like old friends. This is where the secret trait grows stronger. Humans do not only remember, they perform memory. A story told plainly can fade. A story told with gesture, rhythm, humour, and emotion stays alive. You can feel it happening around you. The group is not merely exchanging facts. They are shaping facts into forms that can survive inside another person. Specialists in human origins have long disagreed over how far back complex language goes. Some place its deepest roots far earlier than 30,000 years ago, while others are cautious because speech leaves no fossil. The bones of the throat and skull can offer clues, as can tools and symbolic objects, but the actual voices are gone. What remains is inference. A carved bead whispers that someone understood identity. A planned hunt suggests communication. A painted cave implies shared meaning. The evidence is quiet, but it adds up. By midday, the group reaches a shallow valley where the wind is softer. The smell changes here. Damp soil, animal musk, crushed leaves beneath hide boots. Someone kneels beside tracks pressed into the mud. The marks are deep and fresh. The group gathers around them, and the discussion begins. You hear tones shift, a question, an answer, a correction, a remembered comparison. One person draws a line in the mud with a stick. Another adds a mark beside it. These marks will not last. Rain will take them. Hooves will crush them, but for this moment, they help thought become visible. They are temporary writing before writing, little sketches made for the breath of a single conversation. There is a small oddity here, one that gives the scene a human softness. In many oral cultures known from later history, storytellers used repeated phrases, rhythms, and stock images to make long stories easier to remember. While we cannot prove Ice Age people did exactly the same in every detail, it would make practical sense. Repetition is memory's favourite blanket. It keeps things warm. It keeps them from slipping away in the night. You can almost imagine certain phrases returning again and again. When the frost holds, when the red birds call, when the river speaks under ice. Such phrases would not need writing. They would live because people liked saying them, and because children liked hearing them, and because elders trusted their shape. As evening approaches, the group returns towards a shelter. The sky turns violet at the edges. Smoke appears in the distance, thin and comforting. You feel tired in the good way, the way the body feels after cold air and steady walking. Around the fire, the day begins to transform. What was practical becomes memorable. The tracks in the valley, the mistake in direction, the joke about the animal's awkward walk. All of it is retold, nothing is written down and nothing is permanent, and yet the story exists because the group agrees to carry it. You sit near the warmth and listen as the voices settle into the dark. A child leans against someone's knee. Sparks rise and vanish. The smell of roasted meat drifts through the air. The night gathers outside the circle, but it no longer feels empty. It has been named by the voices inside it. You begin to understand that before writing. Human life was not violent or simple. It was filled with spoken maps, Sung warnings, remembered jokes, and carefully repeated truths. People lived inside stories as surely as they lived beneath the sky. And as the fire lowers again, you feel the old trait moving gently through the circle. The need to remember together. The need to turn experience into words. The need to pass those words into another waiting mind, so tomorrow will not begin from nothing. The voices from the night before seem to travel with you into morning. They do not follow as clear words, because the ancient language is beyond reach, but as rhythm, as memory, as the feeling that nothing important is ever carried by one person alone. The fire has gone dull and grey. Frost gathers on the edges of hide coverings. The air has the clean sharpness of early cold, and when you breathe in, it almost feels like the sky itself has entered your chest. You rise with the group as the camp begins to wake. Someone shakes snow dust from a folded skin. Someone breaks the thin ice that formed overnight on a shallow container of water. A child complains softly, which is also a very old human tradition and probably deserves more academic respect than it gets. Nearby, two adults prepare tools in silence, checking stone points, binding cords, and smoothing the edges of wooden shafts darkened by use. Before the group moves, you pause to understand the larger world around them. These people live in small mobile bands, often following animals, seasons, and usable plants across wide landscapes. Food cannot be stored in neat cupboards. There is no market waiting a short walk away, no refrigerator humming in the corner like a loyal little cave spirit. Survival depends on knowledge, timing, cooperation, and luck. Hunting matters, but so does gathering, so does repairing, so does childcare. So does knowing when not to risk a dangerous journey. The day's plan forms quietly around the fire's remains. A few people will follow tracks toward open ground. Others will remain closer to shelter, gathering wood, scraping hides, watching children, and preparing what food is already available. Nothing feels random. Each task fits into a web of trust. You follow the hunters first. The ground slopes gently toward a plain where low grasses bend beneath the wind. Far away, animals move like dark beads against the pale landscape. The hunters do not rush. They stop often, listening. The air smells of frost, old grass, and animal musk carried lightly on the breeze. A raven calls somewhere overhead. Its voice sounds rough in the morning silence. One hunter crouches and touches the ground. There are tracks in the soil, pressed into the soft earth where yesterday's thaw left a muddy patch. Another person kneels beside them. They do not speak much. Their hands do most of the talking. A pointed finger, a flattened palm, a slight nod toward the slope. You begin to see hunting not as a burst of drama, but as careful reading. The landscape is a page, and they know its letters. A well-established fact from human prehistory is that Upper Paleolithic people used a wide variety of stone, bone, and antler tools, often made with impressive skill. These tools were not crude accidents. Many were carefully shaped for cutting, scraping, piercing, and hunting. Some groups used spear throwers in later parts of the Paleolithic, allowing greater force and distance. Technology here is quiet but clever. It fits the hand, it answers a need. Yet the hunt is not only about weapons. It is about trust. One person must move when another signals. One must wait when waiting feels unpleasant. One must remember what the elder said about wind direction near this ridge. One must stay aware of the others, even while watching the animals ahead. In this way, cooperation becomes almost invisible. It is woven into every step. You feel the cold through your feet as the group lowers behind a line of shrubs. The branches smell resinous and green when brushed. A hunter gestures to the others, then points toward the herd. They observe, they whisper, they wait, waiting. You discover is a large part of ancient life. Modern people often imagine prehistory as constant action, probably because constant action looks better in movies. But much of survival is patience, watching clouds, watching tracks, waiting for hides to dry, waiting for embers to catch, waiting for an animal to move into a better position, waiting for winter to loosen its grip. The human mind, surrounded by all this waiting, learns to fill time with memory, humour, planning, and story. The hunt itself passes with surprising calm. There is movement, yes, and sharp focus, and the quick flight of animals across open ground. But you sense no grand heroic music rising from nowhere. Mostly there is breath, footfall, a shouted signal, and then the long work afterward. One animal has fallen. The group approaches with care, and the mood becomes sober, practical, thankful in a way that does not need a speech. The animal will not belong to one person. It will return to the group. This is the part that matters. Across hunter-gatherer societies studied by anthropologists, sharing food has often been central to social life, especially when large game is involved. No one succeeds every day. A hunter who eats alone today may go hungry tomorrow. Sharing reduces risk and strengthens bonds. It also creates reputation, obligation, gratitude, and sometimes a little social tension. Because humans did not wait for agriculture to invent awkward group dynamics. The meat is prepared with practiced skill, stone blades open hide, hands work steadily. Nothing is wasted if it can be used. Meat, fat, sinew, bone, hide, and antler may all have value. The smell is rich and earthy. Steam rises faintly in the cold air. Ravens gather at a distance, pretending to be casual, as ravens have probably always done. Some archaeologists propose that the human love of storytelling may have grown partly from these shared meals. Others point toward child-raising, ritual, or planning as equally important roots. The evidence cannot give one tidy answer, but the scene before you suggests why food and story sit so naturally together. When people gather to divide a meal, they also divide attention. They notice who contributed, who helped, who waited, who showed courage, who made a mistake, and who turned that mistake into a joke before anyone else could. By late afternoon, the group carries portions back toward camp. The load is heavy, and shoulders bend beneath it. The path home feels longer than the path out, as it often does when you're carrying dinner rather than merely imagining it. Smoke appears ahead, curling from the shelter area. Children run toward the returning party, their faces brighten, not only because food has arrived, but because the day now has a story. At the camp, the sharing begins. Pieces are portioned, tools are cleaned, fat is saved, bones are set aside. People gather close to the fire as the light fades. The first smell of roasting meat spreads through the air, warm and comforting, mingling with smoke and damp hide. Someone speaks, and others listen. A gesture imitates the animal's sudden turn. Another person corrects the detail, smiling. A third adds the moment when one hunter nearly slipped. The group laughs softly. This is belonging made visible. Not sentimental, not perfect, not free of tension, just real. To belong here means you are remembered. Your actions are known. Your hunger matters to others, and their hunger matters to you. The secret trait becomes more than storytelling now. It becomes social imagination. You're able to picture another person's need, another person's fear, another person's place in the group. You understand that your life is tied to theirs. Night settles slowly. The firelight moves across faces, tools, and tired hands. Outside the circle, the cold returns, patient as ever. Inside, warmth passes from flame to food to body to voice. The day's hunt has become a shared memory, and by morning it will already be changing, smoothing itself into a tale that teaches, warns, and comforts. You sit quietly among them, feeling how ancient this pattern is. Work together, eat together. Remember together. And in that gentle rhythm, something recognizably human glows as steadily as the fire. The warmth of the shared meal stays with you as the night loosens and another day begins. The camp wakes slowly, not with bells or alarms or the tragic little song of a phone insisting you have responsibilities, but with breath, movement, and the soft crackle of a fire being coaxed back to life. Pale light spreads across the ground. Frost glitters on the tips of dry grass. A few thin clouds drift over the horizon like scraps of wool pulled across the sky. You follow the group away from the shelters and into open land. The morning is quiet enough that every sound seems carefully placed. A foot presses into frozen soil. A bird calls once, then again, somewhere beyond a low ridge. Animals move through brush, breaking stems as they pass. The air smells cold and clean, with a faint sweetness from crushed plants underfoot. Before you step farther, you begin to see the larger pattern of this ancient life. People here cannot depend on calendars printed on walls, weather forecasts, or neat rows of numbers telling them when winter will end. Their calendar is the world itself, the moon changing shape, the return of certain birds, the thickness of animal coats, the flowering of plants, the direction of the wind. Early humans survived by reading these signs with extraordinary care. Observation was not a pastime, it was a form of protection. You notice one elder standing slightly apart from the others. Watching the eastern sky, their face is still, but their eyes are active. They are not simply admiring the sunrise, though it is certainly worth admiring. The light spills slowly across the valley, touching stones, shrubs, and distant patches of snow. They are measuring, comparing, remembering. A younger person joins them and looks in the same direction. No one writes anything down, and still, knowledge is being recorded. It is being recorded in memory, in repeated attention, in the quiet awareness that today resembles another day from last season, and perhaps the season before that. Humans are pattern-seeking creatures. That is part of the hidden trait you're tracing. The mind searches for order because order brings comfort. It tells you that the world may be frightening, yes, but not completely random. The moon returns, herds follow roots, ice melts, seeds ripen. Darkness comes, and then it goes. People living in the Upper Paleolithic watched animal migrations and seasonal changes because their lives depended on it. Many groups moved through wide territories, returning to certain places when conditions were right. A valley might matter in spring because herds passed through. A river bend might matter in summer because fish gathered there. A sheltered cave might matter during deep cold. The land was not a blank wilderness. It was a living map of remembered cycles. As you walk, you see how the group responds to tiny details. A broken twig, fresh droppings, patches of disturbed snow, the angle of tracks where an animal turned away from the wind. To you, much of this looks like ordinary ground. To them, it is a message. You kneel beside a set of hoofprints pressed into damp earth. Water shines in the bottom of each mark. One hunter gestures toward the shape. Another points to a second trail nearby. They compare. They decide. This is not guesswork. Though of course guesswork has always existed, and has probably always sounded more confident than it should. This is trained attention. There is a gentle odd detail here. In some later hunter-gatherer societies, trackers could identify not just the species of an animal, but sometimes its speed, age, direction, and even behavior from tracks and signs. While you cannot simply copy those later examples onto every Ice Age group, they help you imagine the depth of attention required. A footprint was not merely a footprint. It was a sentence written briefly in mud. The day grows brighter. You continue across the plain until the land rises toward a rocky overlook. From here, the world opens in wide layers, grassland, trees, for distant hills. The wind is stronger, pressing cold fingers through clothing made from hide and fur. Below, the river bends in a shining curve. Its surface is partly frozen. but dark water moves beneath the ice. Someone points toward the moon. It's faint and pale in the morning sky. The group pauses. You remember that prehistoric people had no need for modern astronomy to notice the moon. Its changing shape is one of the most obvious rhythms in the sky. Some carved bones and engraved objects from Ice Age Europe have been interpreted by certain researchers as possible lunar or seasonal notations, although others caution that simple lines and marks are difficult to interpret with certainty. The uncertainty is important. A row of notches might be a count, it might be decoration, it might be something else entirely. Prehistory often hands you a clue and then very politely refuses to explain itself. Still, the idea is beautiful. Someone may have watched the moon wax and fade, carving marks into bone to hold the rhythm outside the mind. If so, it would show another step in the same old human habit. Notice a pattern, give it shape, share it, remember it. You sit on a stone warmed faintly by the morning sun. The surface is rough beneath your hand. The wind smells of snow from far away. Below, the group discusses movement, food, weather, and direction. Their gestures are calm. Their choices are based on memory gathered over years. You might wonder how it felt to live so closely with uncertainty. Today, uncertainty often arrives as a notification, an article, a forecast that changes 3 times before lunch. Here, uncertainty is physical. It is the cloud bank on the horizon, the missing herd, the river ice that may hold or break, the winter that may deepen. Pattern does not remove uncertainty, but it softens it. It gives people a way to act. And maybe that is why humans love patterns even now. You look for shapes in clouds, you sense moods in music. You remember anniversaries, you count days until something changes. You turn chaos into rhythm because the mind rests more easily when events seem connected. By late afternoon, the group returns toward camp carrying gathered wood, useful stones, and news of the land. News, in this world, is not printed or broadcast. It is spoken beside a fire. The river is still dangerous near the bend. The herd may be moving north. The wind has shifted. A certain plant is returning in the sheltered hollow. As evening settles, the sky becomes clear, one by one. Stars appear, the camp quiets. Someone feeds the fire, sparks rise and vanish into the dark. People sit close together, eating slowly, listening as an elder speaks. Their voice moves with the rhythm of things remembered many times. They speak of the moon when it was last this shape. They speak of animals that came after certain birds returned. They speak of a winter when the river froze early. You listen, and then night seems to arrange itself around those words. Above you, the stars are not yet named in ways you would recognize, but they are watched. The moon is not a number on a calendar, but it is known. The seasons are not divided into printed boxes, but they are felt in bone, hunger, warmth, and light. The secret human trait glows quietly again. You seek patterns because patterns help you survive. You share them because shared patterns become culture. And as the fire lowers and the cold presses softly around the circle, you feel how ancient this comfort is. The world may be vast, but it is not entirely unreadable. Somewhere in the dark, the moon keeps its slow path. Somewhere beyond the ridge, animals follow their old roads. And here, among tired voices and fading sparks, human beings learn to sleep a little easier because tomorrow has already been partly imagined. The night has returned slowly, as if it has all the time in the world, which of course it does. The sky deepens from blue to violet to black, and the camp gathers itself into a smaller circle. Beyond the fire, the land becomes uncertain. A ridge that looked harmless by day now seems like the back of some sleeping animal. Shrubs become crouching shapes, stones turn into faces for a moment. Then only stones again, which is considerate of them, really. You sit close to the flames. Heat touches your knees and cheeks while cold rests against your back. The fire makes a soft clicking sound as twigs collapse inward. Sparks rise, vanish, rise again. Smoke drifts sideways and carries the smell of resin. Roasted fat, damp hide and ash around you. People settle into their evening positions with the ease of habit. Someone repairs a binding. Someone scrapes a hide with a steady rasp. A child leans against an adult's side, watching the fire as if it is telling secrets. Before this moment can be understood, you need to remember the world outside the circle. For Ice Age people, darkness was not simply the absence of light. It changed the rules of life. Vision weakened. Sound grew more important. Predators moved. Cold deepened. A familiar path could become dangerous after sunset. Fire was one of humanity's great protections, providing warmth, light, a way to cook food, and a boundary between the known and the unknown. And yet fire also changed the mind. In the restless orange light, the world began to move differently. Shadows stretched across rock and skin, faces flickered. The carved curve of a bone seemed to shift. A painted animal on stone could appear almost alive when the flame trembled. The eyes, always hungry for pattern, began to make sense out of broken shapes. You notice it happening to you. A branch at the edge of the fire looks briefly like a hand. A fold in a hanging hide becomes the profile of a face. A knot in wood seems to watch from the dark. You know, calmly, that these are not living things. Still, your mind offers them to you. It says, perhaps this is something, perhaps pay attention. This tendency has a name in modern language, though the ancient people around you would not have used it. Humans are naturally inclined to see faces, figures, and intentions in ambiguous shapes. It is why clouds become animals, why shadows at night seem suspiciously busy, and why a burnt piece of toast can briefly look like someone famous if breakfast is having an ambitious morning. The habit may be ancient because noticing possible life in the environment was often safer than ignoring it. A quiet discussion continues among researchers about how early humans interpreted these experiences. Were flickering shadows mainly a source of entertainment, a practical aid to storytelling, or part of spiritual imagination? The answer probably changed from group to group and moment to moment. One night, a shadow might be a joke. Another night, in grief or fear, it might feel like a presence. You watch one elder lift a hand between the fire and a rock face. The shadow grows huge on the stone. Fingers bend into the shape of antlers. A child smiles. Another adult makes a low animal sound. And the group gives a soft laugh. The little performance lasts only a few seconds, but it fills the dark with shared attention. There is something tender about it. A hand becomes an animal. A shadow becomes a memory becomes a story. The fire turns ordinary things into symbols, and the group understands the game without needing rules. The ancient world was not humorless. It is easy to imagine people of the deep past as solemn figures trapped in survival mode, staring nobly at the horizon while dramatic wind moves their hair. But they were human. They likely teased, mimicked, laughed, exaggerated, and enjoyed small absurdities. Later hunter-gatherer societies often used humour in teaching, social correction, and storytelling. You cannot simply project every later custom backward, but it would be strange to imagine Ice Age people without laughter. Stone tools survive, jokes, unfortunately, fossilise very poorly. The fire pops again. One of the children startles, then laughs at themselves. Someone nearby gives them a reassuring touch on the shoulder. The night resumes its slow breathing. As you look into the flames, you understand how easily the mind begins to travel. Fire does not present a fixed picture. It changes constantly, it invites watching, it gives the eyes something to follow while the thoughts loosen. That may be one reason firelight and storytelling belong together so naturally. A bright modern room asks the mind to stay awake. A flame gives permission to drift. The elder begins speaking. Their voice is low and steady, with pauses long enough for the crackle of wood to enter the tale. You do not know the words, but you understand the shape. There is a creature, there is a journey, there is a mistake. Perhaps, because stories have always appreciated a good mistake. There is a lesson hidden gently inside the telling. The listeners do not interrupt much. They lean in, eyes reflecting gold. The shadows behind the elder shift with every gesture. When the story describes movement, the shadow moves. When the voice lowers, the surrounding dark seems to lean closer. The fire makes the tale visible without ever drawing it clearly. And because it is never fully clear, everyone has room to imagine. This is important. The secret trait is not only seeing patterns, it is giving those patterns intention. Humans do not merely notice that a shadow looks like a face. They wonder what the face wants. They do not merely hear a branch crack beyond the firelight. They imagine who or what made the sound. That ability can create fear, but it can also create empathy. Myth, planning, and art. To imagine another mind, even in a shadow, is to practice one of humanity's deepest skills. You feel it in the group around you. They track the feelings of the speaker. They sense the child's fear. They remember the animal from the hunt. They imagine the unseen world beyond the light. Their minds reach outward constantly, touching things that are absent, hidden, remembered, or possible. The wind moves across the camp, carrying a colder smell from the open plain. People pull their coverings tighter. Fur brushes against skin. A log shifts and sends up a brief shower of sparks. For a moment, the sparks look like stars escaping from the earth. You glance from the fire to the sky. Above, real stars shimmer in silence. Below, the small fire flickers with its own restless brightness. Between them sits the human circle, warm, tired, watchful, and imaginative. No writing exists here, no temples rise, no cities wait beyond the hill. Yet, already, the mind is filling the world with presence, a face in the flame, a spirit in the wind, a warning in the shadow, a joke in the shape of a branch. You do not need to decide which of these is true. The people beside you may not separate them as neatly as modern categories would prefer. What matters is that meaning is growing in the space between the eye and the world. The fire lowers, voices soften. The child who laughed earlier has fallen asleep, mouth slightly open, one hand curled near their face. The elder's story slows until it becomes almost a murmur. Outside the light, the dark remains dark, but inside the circle, it has been named, shaped, and made a little less lonely. You stay there a while longer, watching the flames fold into embers, and in their glow, you recognize something that still lives in you, the mind that finds faces in shadows, the heart that fills silence with intention, the ancient comfort of imagining that the world is not empty, but listening back. The embers from the last fire still glow faintly when the scene begins to shift again. You remain near the same circle of people, but the mood has changed. The night is quiet, not empty, and the air has a weight to it, as if everyone has agreed without speaking to move more slowly. Wind presses softly against the shelters. A hide covering stirs and settles somewhere beyond the light. An animal calls once, then falls silent. You are still in the age before temples, before priests in woven robes, before written prayers and carved laws. No great stone monument rises on the hill, no bronze bell marks the hour. And yet, something like ritual is already present. Not religion in the later organized sense, with calendars and doctrines and arguments about who gets the better seat near the altar. Something older, something quieter, repeated gestures, shared attention, care given to moments that feel too important to pass through casually. The larger background matters here. Ice Age communities were small, mobile, and deeply dependent on one another. Their lives were shaped by weather, hunger, birth, injury, death, and the uncertain return of animals and seasons in such a world. Emotion could not always be handled alone. Joy, grief, fear, gratitude and hope needed forms. A repeated song, a careful placement of objects, a hand laid on a shoulder, a walk to a certain cave chamber. These actions helped people hold feelings that were too large for ordinary speech. You follow. As several members of the group move away from the main fire, they carry small flames in prepared torches, shielding them from the wind with cupped hands. The light trembles over their faces, their steps are measured. No one hurries. The ground is cold beneath your feet, firm where frost has hardened the soil. You smell smoke, damp stone, old leaves, and the faint animal warmth of fur clothing. Ahead, the cave entrance waits again. This time, it does not feel like a shelter or a gallery. It feels like a threshold. Inside, the air changes at once. The world outside becomes muffled. The torchlight slides across stone walls, revealing markings you remember from before, though now they seem different because the people around you are different. Their voices lower, their bodies grow still. A child who was playful earlier now watches with wide, serious eyes. Even the smallest scrape of a foot sounds meaningful. In many Upper Paleolithic sites, archaeologists have found evidence that caves were used for activities beyond everyday living. Paintings, engravings, pigment traces, unusual arrangements of objects, and difficult-to-reach decorated chambers suggest that certain places carried special meaning. The details vary from region to region, and certainty is difficult, but the pattern is hard to ignore. People entered darkness with fire and intention. You pause beside a wall where red marks gather around the curve of the stone. Someone touches their own chest, then gestures toward the painting. Another hums a low note, almost too quiet to hear. The sound vibrates gently in the chamber, softened by a stone. Others join, not singing a melody exactly, but creating a shared tone. It is rough, human, and strangely calming. You feel the sound in your ribs. Ritual often begins with repetition, a sound repeated, a movement repeated, a place revisited. The human body learns the pattern before the mind explains it. That may be why such actions can feel comforting even when their meanings are uncertain. Today, people still light candles, bow heads, fold hands, stand for songs, keep anniversaries, and repeat words that others have said for generations. The form holds the feeling, very convenient of form, honestly. Near the back of the chamber, a small object rests on a ledge. It may be a shaped stone, or a piece of bone, or perhaps a little bundle wrapped in hide. You cannot know exactly. What matters is the care around it. Nobody tosses it aside, nobody treats it like ordinary clutter. The object has a place, the place has a memory. The memory belongs to the group. A less familiar detail from the deep past is that some prehistoric people placed objects in caves or burials that seem to have had no simple practical function. Perforated shells, animal teeth, shaped figurines, pigment, and unusual stones appear in contexts that suggest decoration, identity, or symbolic value. A pierced shell could travel far from the coast, carried through exchange or migration. Imagine that small shell moving hand to hand across cold landscapes, somehow surviving longer than nearly every sentence spoken around it. Interpretations of early ritual remain unsettled. Some researchers lean toward spiritual explanations, seeing caves and burials as evidence of beliefs about animals, ancestors, or unseen powers. Others urge caution, reminding us that symbolic behavior does not always equal religion in the later sense. A third view focuses on social life, suggesting that repeated ceremonies strengthened group trust and identity. All of these possibilities can sit together in the dark without fighting. Prehistory often allows more than one candle to burn. The people near you begin a slow movement around the chamber. Nothing dramatic happens, no sudden cries, no theatrical thunder. Just steps, torchlight, and the gentle hum that rises and falls. One person scatters a small amount of red pigment on the stone floor. The powder lands softly, bright against grey rock. Another holds a child close and whispers into their hair. You sense that the child is being taught not only what to do, but how to feel. This is how culture enters the body, not through explanation alone, but through atmosphere, the smell of smoke, the sound of voices in stone, the sight of red powder in firelight, the warmth of someone's hand, years later. Perhaps that child will remember the cave whenever they smell ochre or hear a certain tone at night. The memory will not be a neat sentence, it will be a whole room inside them. You stand quietly as the group gathers near a painted animal. The elder raises a hand and pauses. Everyone looks. The animal's body seems to swell and soften under the moving flame. It is not alive, and yet the moment treats it as more than paint. Perhaps the animal is remembered because it feeds them. Perhaps it is honoured because it frightens them. Perhaps it belongs to a story about beginnings, journeys, or the dead. You do not know. The uncertainty is part of the hush. Outside, modern life often asks for clear labels: art, religion, education, entertainment, therapy, social bonding. Please choose one and file accordingly. But here, in this chamber, the categories blur. A song can teach, a painting can comfort, a gesture can bind the group. A repeated walk into darkness can make fear manageable. That blending may be very old. The hidden trait you are tracing has become more than storytelling, more than pattern-seeking, more than seeing faces in flame. It is now the human habit of turning shared emotion into shared form. People take the invisible and give it rhythm. They take uncertainty and surround it with gesture. They take grief, gratitude, fear, and hope, and place them gently where the group can hold them together. The torches burn lower. One by one, the voices fade. The chamber returns to dripping water and soft breath. The red pigment remains on the floor. The painted animal waits on the wall. People begin to turn back toward the entrance, carrying the fire carefully through the dark. When you step outside, the night air feels wide and cold. Stars shimmer overhead. The campfire glows in the distance. Small but welcoming. You look back once at the cave mouth. It is only stone. And it is not only stone. That, perhaps, is where ritual begins. You return from the cave with the others, carrying the quiet of the chamber back into the open night. The campfire is lower now, its flames bent close to the wood, its embers glowing like small red eyes under ash. People settle into familiar places. Fur coverings rustle. A bowl made from a hollowed piece of wood is passed from hand to hand. Somewhere nearby, a child yawns with such complete surrender that it seems older than language itself. The focus of the evening shifts gently toward the young. In a world like this, childhood is not separate from adult life in the way modern childhood often is. There are no schools with bells, no bright classrooms, no pencils chewed during difficult lessons, no homework mysteriously forgotten until bedtime. Children learn by being present. They watch hands shape stone. They listen to stories around the fire. They follow older children through safe parts of the landscape, and they copy, fail, laugh, try again, and slowly become useful members of the group. The background is simple but important. Early human groups depended on learning across generations. Many skills were too complex to discover alone every time, making a sharp blade, preparing hides, tracking animals, recognizing edible plants, carrying fire, finding shelter, and understanding social rules all required teaching. Humans are unusual because childhood is long. That long childhood gives the brain time to absorb not only facts, but habits, gestures, fears, jokes, loyalties, and meaning. You sit beside a shelter where a small child watches an older girl twist plant fibers into cord. The older girl moves slowly at first, exaggerating each motion so the younger child can see. Twists, folds, pulls, smooth. The fibers smell dry and grassy. Tiny pieces cling to the child's fingers. The first attempt falls apart almost immediately, which feels very fair. Civilization was not built on first attempts. The older girl smiles and begins again. No lecture is needed. The lesson is in the hands. Nearby, another child taps 2 stones together, trying to imitate the careful movements of an adult toolmaker. The adult glances over, says something short, and adjusts the child's grip. The flakes that come away are poor and uneven. Still, everyone treats the effort as part of the path. One day, those hands may shape a blade that cuts hide or prepares food. Tonight, they mostly create small chips and confidence. Archaeological finds from prehistoric sites include small or poorly made tools that some researchers interpret as possible evidence of children practicing. Not every rough object was made by a child. Of course, adults also had bad days, and stone does not preserve embarrassment. But the idea is plausible and surprisingly touching. Somewhere in the deep past, young hands may have left behind their learning in the form of clumsy flakes and miniature attempts. You move closer to the fire, where an elder has begun telling a story. Several children gather nearby, their bodies loose with tiredness but their eyes still alert. The elder's voice is low, the words are unknown to you. But the rhythm is easy to feel. Repetition returns again, though not like a dull echo. It is more like a path worn smooth by many footsteps. A phrase comes back. A gesture returns, the children anticipate it. One child mouths the sound silently before the elder says it. Pleased to know what comes next, this is memory being built in real time. Some specialists in human evolution see teaching, imitation, and shared attention as central to human success. Others place more weight on language, tool complexity, or cooperation. But these ideas are connected. A child who can watch closely, imagine another person's intention, and copy a skill gains access to a vast inheritance. The group does not need to reinvent everything. Knowledge can accumulate, like warm ash preserving a hidden coal. The elder pauses, and the children lean in. A small figure is placed near the fire, perhaps carved from bone or shaped from clay like earth pressed into imagination. It may represent an animal, it may be a toy, it may have meaning beyond play. You cannot know. That uncertainty gives the object a soft glow. In later prehistoric sites, small figurines and animal carvings appear in many forms, and their purposes remain open to interpretation. Some may have been ritual objects, some teaching aids, some symbols of identity, and some, very possibly, things children were allowed to handle until an adult said, gently but firmly, "Not that one." The child nearest you picks up a smooth pebble and pretends it is an animal moving across the ground. Another child joins with a twig, making a fence, a spear, or perhaps a tree. Their play is quiet but full of meaning. They are not simply passing time, they are rehearsing the world. They practice hunting without danger. They practice fear without real harm. They practice roles they will one day carry for real. Today, children still do this. A cardboard box becomes a spaceship, a blanket becomes a cave, a stuffed animal becomes a patient in need of urgent medical care. Play is imagination with work clothes on. It looks light, but it teaches deeply. A woman near the fire begins to hum. The tune has only a few notes, soft and rocking. A sleepy child presses their face into a fur covering. The texture is thick, warm and slightly rough. Smoke drifts upward. The smell of cooked fat and resin hangs in the air. The stars above are sharp in the cold sky. You can feel how a child might carry this sensory world forever. The sound of a voice, the orange light on faces, the taste of warm food, the feeling that the group is near. This is where bedtime history begins before history. Long before books, children fell asleep to the voices of people explaining the world. Not always gently, perhaps, because ancient people were not magical forest therapists. They were tired humans with sore feet and a great many practical concerns. But still, the pattern existed. Night, fire, voice, child, story, memory, story. The hidden trait you are following survives because children inherit it before they understand it. They do not begin by analysing symbols or debating the origins of myth. They begin by listening. They notice which stories make adults serious, which gestures are repeated, which animals are respected, which places are avoided, which jokes make the group laugh. Slowly, the world gains invisible lines. You watch one child ask a question. The elder answers with a small sushi rather than a direct explanation. That is very human. A simple answer might solve the moment. A story gives the child something to carry. It wraps knowledge in feeling, setting, and rhythm, so it can be found again later when needed. The fire shifts. A log collapses inward with a soft sigh. Sparks rise and fade one by one. The children grow still. The smallest is already asleep. One hand open beside their cheek. Fingers curled as if still holding a dream. The older children remain awake a little longer, listening to the last few words. You look around the circle and sense how much is being passed on without anyone naming it. How to sit, how to listen, how to wait, how to remember, how to belong. The night deepens, the elder's voice becomes softer, then stops. No one applauds, no one needs to. The story has done its work. It has settled into young minds like warmth beneath a fur blanket. And as you sit there, wrapped in smoke, starlight, and quiet breathing, you understand that the old human trait did not survive because it was carved only into stone. It survived because it was carried in children, night after night, from one sleeping generation into the next. By morning, the children's sleepy breathing has faded into the wider sounds of camp. The night stories have done their quiet work, settling into memory like warmth beneath fur. Now the day returns with its ordinary demands. Ash must be stirred, tools must be checked, food must be prepared, someone must find dry wood, which, as every age of humanity has discovered, is easier to desire than to locate. You walk toward a small working area near the edge of camp, where several people sit close to the ground. The light is pale and cool. It catches on bits of bone, stone flakes, shell, and red pigment scattered across a hide. A woman turns a small object between her fingers. Another person uses a fine stone tool to scrape and smooth its surface. The movements are careful, almost tender. Before you look closer, you pause to understand what these objects mean in the larger human story. By 30,000 years ago, people in many regions were making ornaments, beads, carved figures, decorated tools, and personal items that seemed to carry meaning beyond simple survival. Clothing kept the body warm. A spear helped bring food. But a pierced shell, a carved pendant, or a pattern of marks on bone suggests something else. Identity, memory, belonging, perhaps status, perhaps beauty for its own sweet and slightly impractical sake. And that impracticality matters. The person in front of you holds a bead made from shell. It is tiny, pale, and worn smooth at the edges. A hole has been made through it so it can hang from a cord or be sewn onto clothing. You imagine the patience needed, first finding or receiving the shell, then piercing it without breaking it, then smoothing it, then keeping it safe through travel, weather, and all the small accidents that make life so committed to inconvenience. Some prehistoric shell beads have been found far from the coasts where the shells originated, suggesting long-distance movement, exchange, or travel networks. That little fact is easy to pass over too quickly. A small shell might cross hills, rivers, and open plains before resting against someone's chest. It may have moved through many hands, each person understanding that this object was not food, not a blade, not firewood, yet somehow still worth carrying. You lean closer. The bead catches the light. It is beautiful in a quiet way, not grand, not polished like jewellery behind glass, but shaped by attention nearby. Another object rests on a flat stone. It is a carved piece of bone or ivory. Perhaps an animal figure, perhaps something more abstract. Its lines are simple. But the maker has taken time to give it form. The surface carries faint tool marks. You can almost feel the pressure of the hand that shaped it. Interpretations of these early symbolic objects vary widely. Some researchers see them as signs of social identity, marking group membership or personal status. Others connect them with ritual, storytelling, or teaching. A few urge caution, reminding us that beauty, play, and personal attachment may have mattered too, even when they do not fit neatly into survival explanation. The past is old, but it was not necessarily boring. You watch as someone lifts a cord of twisted fibre and threads several small beads onto it. The beads click softly against one another. The sound is delicate, like tiny stones in a shallow stream. A child nearby reaches toward them with great interest and absolutely no sense of archaeological responsibility. An adult gently moves the beads away, which may be the oldest known form of "please do not touch that." The camp smells of smoke, scraped hide, damp earth, and warmed bone. A patch of sunlight falls across a fur cloak, revealing small decorations sewn near its edge. They might mark family, skill, age, role, or simply taste. In the cold open world of the Ice Age, clothing was not only protection, it could also become a moving surface for meaning. A body walking through the landscape could carry signs that others understood. You think of modern clothing for a moment. A wedding ring, a team scarf, a uniform, a favourite necklace, a shirt from a concert nobody asked about but you mention anyway. People still wrap identity around the body. We still tell others who we are before speaking a word. This ancient necklace, then, is not so foreign. It is a sentence made from shell. It says something, even if you no longer know the language. A little distance away, someone prepares pigment. Red ochre is crushed again, mixed with fat or water until it becomes usable. A small amount is rubbed along an object's surface, deepening its colour. The red gathers in grooves and makes the markings clearer. The smell is earthy, mineral, faintly metallic. Colour changes the object. It asks the eye to notice. An unusual detail from the Ice Age world is that some decorated objects were made from mammoth ivory, a material that required both skill and patience to carve. Mammoth ivory is hard, curved, and not exactly waiting politely to become art in moulds, yet people shaped it into beads, figures, and tools in parts of Europe. Tiny carved animals and human forms appear from this period, suggesting not only technical ability but imagination held carefully in the hand. The hidden trait you are following now shines through objects. A story can live in voice, a pattern can live in memory, but an object lets meaning travel. It can be worn, gifted, hidden, repaired, inherited, lost, found. It can survive its maker. It can sit quietly in the soil for thousands of years until another human hand lifts it into the light and wonders who touched it first. You watch a young person receive a finished pendant. The group does not erupt into ceremony, but the moment has weight. The pendant is placed around the neck. Fingers adjust the cord as someone smiles. Someone else murmurs a comment that makes the young person lower their eyes with shy pride. Perhaps it marks growing older. Perhaps it marks family. Perhaps it is just a gift after a long season. You cannot know, and that's all right. The meaning does not need to be fully translated for you to feel its human shape. As the day continues, the decorated objects move through camp. A bead catches firelight. A carved figure is tucked into a pouch. A marked tool is handed from one person to another. These things are small, but they thicken the world. They remind you that humans do not live by function alone. They make things special. They attach feelings to materials. They let objects carry memory when words are not enough. Even now, you probably own something that has little practical value but great emotional weight. A photograph, a ring, a note, a stone from a beach, some tiny souvenir kept for reasons difficult to explain without sounding slightly dramatic. That, too, belongs to the same ancient habit. By evening, the camp returns to firelight. The beads glow softly against skin. The carved object rests near the speaker's hand as another story begins. You realize that the object and the story are not separate. One gives the other shape. The pendant may remind people of a journey. The figure may call up an animal. The marked bone may carry a memory too fragile for plain speech. The fire lowers. The night smells of smoke and cold grass. You sit among these small treasures and feel how gently they hold the human need to be known. A shell from far away, a bead made by patient fingers, a carved shape held close in a pouch. They're quiet things, but they speak across time. And as you watch the pendant rise and fall with someone's breathing, you understand that identity itself may have begun this way. Not as a grand declaration, but as a small object warmed by the body, carrying the message that this person belongs, remembers, and is remembered. The pendant from the evening before fades into memory as the weather begins to change. You wake to a world that has grown quieter overnight. Snow has fallen lightly across the ground, not deep enough to bury the camp, but enough to soften every edge. Stones wear white caps, branches bend under powder. The shelters look smaller beneath the pale sky, as if the whole world has pulled a blanket up around its shoulders. The air is very cold. You feel it first in your nose, then in your fingers, then in the careful way everyone moves. Breath leaves each mouth in small clouds. Fur clothing is pulled close. A child remains tucked under a hide covering, looking out at the morning with the expression of someone who has wisely decided that civilization should wait until spring. Before you walk into this winter day, it helps to remember how demanding Ice Age life could be. During the Upper Paleolithic, people lived through long cold periods when food, shelter, and warmth required constant planning. The climate did not stay exactly the same everywhere, but in many regions the landscape was harsher and more open than today. People adapted with tailored clothing, fire, shelters, seasonal movement, and deep knowledge of animals and plants. Winter changes everything. It makes distance longer. It makes mistakes heavier. It makes warmth precious. The group moves slowly through the morning tasks. Someone clears snow from a hearth area. Someone checks stored bones and hides. Someone breaks ice from a container. The sound is sharp in the cold air. A few people leave camp to gather fuel, because fire is not one thing but a chain of labour. You need wood, dry grass, embers, patience, and the repeated decision to keep it alive. You follow a pair of adults toward a stand of low trees. Snow creaks beneath your feet. The branches smell faintly of pine and damper bark. One person cuts dead wood with a stone tool, working carefully to avoid wasting effort. The other gathers smaller twigs, the kind that catch flame quickly. Their hands move stiffly from cold, even through thick coverings. The wind finds ways in. Because winter has always been annoyingly talented. Food is also different now. The lush variety of warmer seasons has narrowed. Certain roots may still be found, certain animals tracked, certain stored foods used with care. But winter is a season of counting without numbers. How much fuel remains, how much energy can be spent, how far the group should travel, how long the weather might hold. In some Ice Age sites, archaeologists have found evidence that humans used bones from large animals as fuel where wood was scarce. Burned mammoth bones and other remains suggest that people could adapt creatively to difficult environments. It is a strange little detail, almost cozy in a very prehistoric way. When the landscape offers limited trees, even ancient fireplaces become resourceful. By afternoon, the sky lowers, clouds gather like grey wool. The group returns to camp with wood, roots, and news of tracks seen near a frozen stream. The fire is strengthened, and people come close to it in layers. Outer circles work, inner circles warm, children stay near adults. Tools are repaired because winter does not excuse dull blades. You sit with them as snow begins again, falling in slow, soft flakes. Each flake vanishes near the fire, becoming nothing before it touches the ground. The smell of smoke thickens. Sparks rise into the white air and disappear. Long winters make memory longer too. There is less movement now, more time spent in shelter, more hours when the dark arrives early and leaves late. This is when stories become especially useful, not only for teaching where to hunt or which valley to avoid, but for enduring the long inward pull of cold and waiting. A story can stretch the mind beyond the camp. It can bring back summer grass, running herds, rivers without ice, and people who are no longer there. Different scholars approach this from different angles. Some emphasize storytelling as a tool of survival knowledge, especially in difficult climates. Others focus on its emotional role, helping groups manage fear, grief, boredom, and uncertainty. Another line of thought looks at winter gatherings as moments when social bonds were renewed through shared talk, music, and memory. The truth may be gently crowded, with all these purposes sitting close together by the same fire. As evening falls, the group becomes quieter. The day has been tiring. Cold makes even simple work feel heavy. Shoulders slump, fingers are warmed over embers. A child complains softly about hunger, then accepts a small portion of food. Someone wraps a hide more tightly around an elder's legs. The gesture is small and practical, but it carries tenderness. Outside, snow covers tracks almost as soon as they are made. Inside the circle of warmth, memory resists being covered. The elder begins to speak. Tonight the story moves slowly. You can tell by the listeners' faces that it is familiar. No one seems surprised, but no one is bored. Familiar stories are not meant to surprise every time. They are meant to return like fire, like winter, like the same song you play when your mind is tired and you need the world to be kind for a few minutes. The voice carries images of another season, a river full of sound, a herd moving through dust, a child born during a storm. A difficult journey survived because someone remembered an old path. The words are unknown, yet the feeling is clear. The story says, "This cold is not everything others have endured. You can endure too." You notice the children listening from beneath fur coverings. Their eyes are half closed. The firelight trembles over their faces. They are learning, but not in the bright alert way of morning practice. They are absorbing. The rhythm of the voice becomes part of the rhythm of sleep. This is memory as shelter, not a roof of wood or hide, but a shelter all the same. The snow thickens. It taps softly against stretched skins and settles along the edges of the camp. A dog-like animal, if one is near this group in your imagined passage through time, curls tighter beside the warmth. The relationship between humans and dogs was emerging in deep prehistory, though exactly when domestication began remains open to careful argument. Some evidence suggests very early bonds between humans and canids, but dates and interpretations are still discussed. Even uncertainty feels gentle here, like a shape just beyond the firelight. The elder's voice lowers. Someone adds fuel, the new branch hisses as snow melts from its bark, smoke leans into the shelter, then escapes upward through a gap. The smell stings your eyes slightly. You pull the fur closer around your shoulders and feel the rough warmth against your skin. You begin to understand why long winters produce long memories, when the world outside becomes white, dangerous, and still. The inner world grows larger. People revisit old journeys, they polish stories by telling them again, they remember the dead, they imagine the coming spring, they share fears without naming them directly. The hidden trait you have followed from cave walls to handprints to firelit faces now becomes a way of surviving time itself. Not just surviving hunger, not just surviving cold, surviving the waiting. The fire burns lower, but no one moves away. The group remains close, joined by warmth and by the soft thread of the story. Outside, snow keeps falling. Inside, the old words continue, carrying summer through winter, memory through darkness, and human comfort through the longest night. The winter story carries you into another night, and then into another season, though the fire remains your anchor. Snow thins, the air softens, water begins to move again beneath melting ice. First as a faint murmur, then as a confident rush. The camp shifts with the weather. Fur coverings are shaken out, tools are packed. Old paths open like memories returning to the body. You walk with the group across land that is waking. The ground is damp beneath your feet. It smells of thawing earth, crushed grass and cold water. Birds call from low branches far away. Animals move in loose lines across the plain, following instincts older than any map. The people around you watch them with the same careful attention you have seen before. But now there is something more in the watching. The animals are not only food or danger, they are characters in the great story of the world. Before cities and written myths, people still needed explanations. Why do herds return? Why does the moon change? Why does thunder speak across the sky? Why do people dream of the dead? The answers were not written in sacred books yet. They lived in spoken tales, repeated in camps, caves, river valleys, and winter shelters. These tales may have helped groups remember practical knowledge, but they also gave emotional shape to mystery. You follow the group to a riverbank where the water shines under a pale morning sun. Someone kneels to drink. Someone else points to tracks near the mud. A child finds a smooth stone and holds it up proudly, as if discovering the first stone in history. Nearby, an elder watches a bird circle overhead and begins to speak. The others listen. The story may be about the bird, or the river, or a hunter who once followed a bird to water, or perhaps, in a way that would make perfect sense by firelight. All three at once, this is how shared myths begin. Not necessarily as grand epics with thunderous names and dramatic introductions. Sometimes they may begin as a remembered event. A strange animal seen at dusk, a dream after a death, a difficult journey that ended near a certain rock. Over time, retelling smooths the edges. The person becomes an ancestor, the animal becomes a guide, the place becomes sacred, memory becomes story, and story becomes something larger than memory. Comparative studies of later oral traditions show that myths often preserve information about landscapes, animals, seasons, and social values. This does not mean every myth is a literal record, politely waiting to be decoded like a puzzle box. But it does suggest that stories can carry practical and symbolic knowledge together. They can say where to go, what to fear, how to behave, and what the group believes about itself. A curious detail from later hunter-gatherer and oral cultures is that animals often appear not merely as creatures, but as clever beings with moods, plans, humour, and lessons to teach. Foxes trick, ravens steal, bears remember, hares escape. These animal stories feel distant and familiar at the same time. Even now, people give personalities to pets, cars, storms, and occasionally printers. And though printers have done very little to earn our trust, you sit by the river as the elder's tale continues. Their hands shape the air, fingers become wings, a bent wrist becomes a beak. A sudden tilt of the head makes the children smile. The bird overhead circles once more, as if participating. Though probably it has its own appointments. The story pulls the landscape into itself. River, bird, sky child, memory, all joined for a while. You can feel how myths bind a group, Together. If everyone knows the same story about the river becomes more than water. It becomes a place of shared memory. If everyone knows the tale of the animal that watches over a certain valley, the valley becomes part of identity. If everyone hears the same explanation for death or dreams or storms, fear becomes something people can hold together instead of alone. Among archaeologists and anthropologists, there is no simple agreement about how far back fully developed myths can be traced. Spoken stories leave almost no direct evidence. Cave paintings, figurines, burials, and repeated symbols suggest rich inner worlds, but they do not provide scripts. Some scholars see Ice Age art as evidence of mythic thinking, while others prefer more cautious language. Warning that images do not tell us exactly what stories surrounded them. The silence is frustrating, yes, but also restful. Not every ancient thing wishes to fill out paperwork for us. The group moves on from the river toward a low hill scattered with stones. Here, the wind is gentle. A few people pause beside one large boulder marked by the natural cracks and patches of lichen. Perhaps this place is known. Perhaps people have returned here for years. Someone places a small feather near the stone. Someone else touches the surface briefly. Nothing more happens, and still, the moment feels full. The feather may be an offering, it may be a marker. It may be a child's found treasure left behind because an adult approved of the gesture. You cannot know, but the act shows how easily humans attach meaning to place. A stone becomes a memory holder. A hill becomes part of a story. A path becomes a route not only through land, but through time. By evening, the group has returned to camp, and the story from the river returns with them. It is told again near the fire, now with more detail. Someone adds a sound for the bird, someone else laughs and corrects it. The children repeat the gesture of wings. The tale is already becoming communal property. It belongs less to the person who first spoke it and more to everyone who remembers it. That is the secret strength of myth. It lets memory become shared imagination. You do not have to witness an event to feel connected to it. You only need to inherit the story. A child born years later may hear about the riverbird and feel that it belongs to them. A person walking alone near that river may remember the tale and feel less alone. A group facing hunger may retell a story of return, of animals coming back, of spring following winter, and take comfort from the pattern. The firelight grows warmer as night deepens. Around you, faces glow and fade as flames shift. The smell of smoke mixes with river damp still clinging to clothing. Someone cracks a bone for marrow. Someone repairs a cord. Someone hums the low tune you heard before, and the story settles into that sound. You look upward. The stars are bright again. No one here has written constellations into official charts, but the sky is not empty. Shapes will be found there. Animals, paths, ancestors, warnings, jokes, and memories may gather among the lights. The human mind does not leave a sky blank for long. Apparently even the universe needs captions. As the night slows, you realize that myth is not an escape from reality. It is one of the oldest ways humans entered reality more deeply. It made the river speak, the animal matter. The dead remain near. The seasons feel understandable, and the group feel held inside a larger story. You sit close to the fire, listening as the riverbird rises once more in the elder's hands. And somewhere between wing, flame, voice, and starlight, the old human trait continues, turning the world into something remembered together. The story of the riverbird fades into morning, and the world begins to change again. Not suddenly, not with a grand announcement, because history rarely respects dramatic timing. It changes like light moving across a floor. so slowly that only later do you realize the room has become different. The small band you have followed through caves, fires, snow, and river paths now carries you toward a later human world, one where people begin to remain longer in certain places, where shelters grow sturdier, and where old habits must learn new shapes. You walk into a valley where the season is mild, the air smells of grass, smoke, wet clay, and stored food. A stream moves nearby with a steady, friendly sound. Around you. People are not moving camp today, they are repairing structures, sorting plant materials, tending fires, and working near pits or storage areas in the ground. There is still hunting, there is still gathering, there is still risk, but the rhythm is beginning to feel less like constant travel and more like return. Before describing the scene too closely, you need the broader setting over many thousands of years after the Ice Age. Human groups in different parts of the world began experimenting with more settled ways of life. This did not happen everywhere at the same time, and it did not happen because someone woke up and said, "Wonderful news, everyone, we shall now invent chores permanently." Some people stayed longer near rich coastlines, rivers, or seasonal food sources. Later, in certain regions, farming and animal herding appeared. Settlements grew from particular local histories, not from one simple universal switch. You notice that more people are visible here than in the earlier camps. Children run between shelters, adults call to one another. Smoke rises from several hearths instead of one central fire. The ground is marked by the repeated use. Paths have formed between working areas. A place where people grind plant food has become smooth beneath countless knees and hands. The stone makes a low, scraping sound as grain or seeds are crushed against it. That sound is new in your journey. Steady, domestic, almost sleepy. You crouch near a woman grinding seeds. Her shoulders move in a practiced rhythm. The work is tiring. It smells faintly nutty, dusty, and warm. A child sits beside her, picking through a basket with serious concentration, removing bits of husk, pebble, or stem nearby. Someone repairs a woven container. The fibers creak softly. Another person smears wet clay along the edge of a wall, sealing a gap against wind. A well-supported historical point is that early settled communities required new kinds of cooperation. People had to manage storage, shared spaces, food preparation, building, waste, disputes, and relationships with neighbouring groups. Staying put solved some problems and created others, which is basically humanity's favourite hobby. A mobile group can leave certain difficulties behind. A village has to live next door to them. You follow a narrow footpath between shelters. The packed earth feels firm beneath your feet. Ash has been scattered near a doorway. Hides hang to dry. Baskets lean against a wall. The smell of smoke is stronger here because fires burn in more places. You hear more voices too. Not louder, exactly, but layered. A laugh from one shelter. A sharp correction from another. A baby crying. Someone singing while working. Perhaps to keep rhythm. Perhaps to keep boredom from winning. In a larger group, the old human trait changes. Story no longer belongs only to the small circle around one fire. It travels between households. It attaches to places. It becomes local memory. Who built that storage pit? Who married into which family? Who forgot to cover the food and attracted animals? An event which surely deserved retelling for many years. Reputation becomes more complicated when more people are present to remember your finest and least convenient moments. A small oddity from early settled life is that archaeologists sometimes find houses built, repaired, filled in, and rebuilt on the same spot, creating layers of domestic memory under later floors. In some places, the home was not merely abandoned, it was transformed, covered, or ritually closed before another structure rose nearby or above it. Imagine living literally on top of your grandparents' floor, which is charming, meaningful, and possibly a little crowded. People who study early villages offer different explanations for how social life changed. Some emphasize food production and storage as the driving forces. Others look at ritual, kinship, trade, or shared defense. Many now favor mixed explanations, because real communities are rarely polite enough to be caused by one thing: a village's food, memory, argument, and labor, love, habits, and mud all deciding to stay in one place together. As the afternoon settles, you reach a central space where several people gather. It is not a formal square with paving stones or public notices. It is simply the area everyone knows. Children play nearby. Adults exchange goods, food, or information. A visitor from another group may be present, recognized by clothing, ornament, or accent. The pendant you saw in an earlier age returns to mind. Identity now has more neighbors to speak to. Someone begins telling a story about the valley. This story is different from the riverbird tale. It is tied more firmly to place. It describes where the water used one season, where a shelter collapsed, where a certain family first stayed through winter. The listeners know the landmarks. Some may have witnessed parts of the story, others inherited it. In this way, settlement makes memory heavier, the land fills with events. You can feel how social rules gather around the tale. Do not take from this store without asking. Remember which path floods. Respect the old hearth place. Share labour before the cold comes. A story can carry all of this more gently than a list of commands. Lists have their uses, certainly, but no one ever fell asleep peacefully to a thrilling inventory of village regulations. A story lets the rule enter through image, feeling, and example. Evening arrives with soft gold light. Smoke rises straight upward as the wind calms. The village smells of clay walls cooling, cooked food, damp reeds, and wood smoke. People sit in smaller groups now, not all around one fire, but within hearing distance of one another. The soundscape has changed from the old mobile camp. It is busier, more layered, more social, yet the core remains familiar. A child asks why a certain stone near the stream should not be moved. An elder answers with a story. You smile because of course they do. That is the ancient method still at work. The old trait has survived the shift from clan to village by adapting. It no longer only helps people track herds or endure winter nights. Now it helps them remember boundaries, obligations, ancestors, debts, marriages, warnings, and places where the roof always leaks when rain comes from the west. The firelight grows softer. A pot. If this is a pottery using community in the long path of settled life. Warms near embers. Steam rises with the smell of cooked plants. Someone stirs it slowly. Someone else mends a basket in fading light. The village settles, not into silence, but into a woven murmur. You realize that civilization does not begin by replacing the old human trait. It begins by giving it more rooms to live in. The cave wall becomes the house wall. The hunting tale becomes the village memory. The shared meal becomes stored food and obligation. The fire circle becomes a neighborhood. And beneath all of it, the same quiet need remains, to belong somewhere, to know the story of that somewhere, to hear your own life folded into a tale larger than one night, one season, or one pair of hands. The village morning opens with a thicker sound than the old camps ever had. Not louder in a harsh way, but fuller, layered with small human noises. A stone grinder turns in a steady rhythm. A baby fusses, then quiets. Someone laughs near a doorway. A basket scrapes against packed earth. Smoke rises from several hearths, and the air carries the mixed scent of warm grain, damp clay, old ash, animal hide, and bodies beginning another day together. You walk toward the place where paths meet. It's not yet a market in the later sense, with rows of stalls, prices, coins, and someone confidently charging too much for a small cup of something hot. But it has the beginnings of exchange. People gather here because goods, news, favours, and attention move more easily where paths cross. A woman brings a bundle of woven fibres, a man carries shaped stone blades wrapped in hide. Another person has dried food, shells, pigment, or polished bone pieces. Nearby, children hover with interest. Because wherever adults exchange things, children sense the possibility of snacks, stories, or trouble. To understand this world, you need to see that exchange long predates money. Early communities traded and gifted useful materials across distances. Obsidian, flint, shells, ochre, beads, and other valued items moved from hand to hand through networks of travel. Kinship, marriage, seasonal gatherings, or visiting groups. These objects carried practical value, but they also carried information. If a shell from the sea appears far inland, it tells you that people are connected beyond what the eye can see. You watch a small exchange unfold. A blade is placed on a piece of hide. Its edge catches the light. Another person studies it carefully, then offers a cord decorated with tiny beads. The two speak softly. Others nearby pretend not to listen, which is one of history's least convincing behaviours. A woman glances over while continuing to work. A child leans in until an adult gently pulls them back by the shoulder. The blade is accepted. The cord changes hands. Nothing is written down, yet everyone near enough to notice now carries part of the record. This is where murmurs become power. In a village, reputation matters. Who makes good tools? Who shares fairly? Who borrows and forgets? Who tells the truth about the quality of a hide? Who always seems to arrive after the heavy work is finished? A type of persons apparently as old as settlement itself. These details move through ordinary conversation. They do not need formal announcements. They live in remarks while grinding food, jokes while mending baskets, whispers near fires, and careful pauses when someone's name is mentioned. One line of archaeological thinking connects growing settlements with more complex social relationships. As communities became larger and more settled, people needed new ways to manage trust beyond immediate family. Material goods, visible ornaments, repeated gatherings, and shared stories could help create social order. But specialists do not all agree on which force mattered most. Some stress economics and storage. Others focus on ritual gatherings or kin networks. Still others point to the quiet machinery of reputation, the way ordinary talk teaches people who can be trusted. You pass a house where two older women sit repairing woven containers. Their fingers move quickly through reeds or plant fibres. The baskets smell faintly green and dry. Their conversation moves even faster. You cannot understand the words, but you can feel the pattern. A name, a pause, a soft laugh, another name, a raised eyebrow, even across thousands of years. The raised eyebrow requires no translation. Gossip often has a bad reputation now, usually because everyone enjoys it until they are the subject, but in small communities, talk about others can serve a serious function. It spreads warnings. It praises generosity. It discourages selfishness. It helps people understand who is allied with whom, who needs help, who has broken a promise, and who deserves respect. Gentle gossip can be social weather. You may not always like it, but you would be unwise to ignore the clouds. A little odd detail from later ancient trade is that some objects became valuable partly because they came from far away, not because they were more useful. A shell, a coloured stone, or a rare pigment might impress precisely because it carried distance inside it, long before luxury brands. Humans already understood the mysterious charm of saying. This came from elsewhere. Apparently the phrase imported goods has been doing emotional work for a very long time. You follow the path toward the village edge, where visitors have arrived. They carry objects that look slightly different from those made here. Their clothing is cut in another way. Their ornaments use unfamiliar shells or beads. Their speech has different sounds. Though gestures ease the crossing, the meeting is cautious but not cold. People offer food, they inspect goods, they ask questions, point toward ridges, mimic animals, draw lines in dust. Information travels with objects. Where the herds were seen, which path flooded, who died, who was a child ready for marriage, who has quarrelled with whom, which group found good stone near the hills. The market, such as it is, becomes a listening place. You stand near a cooking hearth as steam rises from a clay pot. The smell is earthy and warm, perhaps seeds, roots, greens, and fat simmering together. The pot itself speaks of another change in human life. Pottery appeared in different regions at different times, often associated with cooking, storage and settled or semi-settled living. A pot lets food become softer, safer, and more shareable. It also breaks easily, because every technological advance likes to include a small insult. A child taps the side of the pot and is corrected immediately. Some things, again, never change. By late afternoon, the visitors sit with villagers in the central area. Goods have moved. News has moved faster. A story begins about a distant place where the ground is red and stone lies exposed after rain. Another person adds a memory of travelling there years before. Someone disagrees about the route. They draw competing paths in the dust, each one certain, each one perhaps partly wrong. You could almost hear the ancient version of no. No. You turn after the big tree, which is rarely helpful once there are many big trees. The scene is calm, but full of invisible threads. Trade is not only trade, it is trust made visible. It is social memory moving through objects. It is identity displayed in beads and tools. It is news carried by tired feet. As the sun lowers, the village fills with amber light. Smoke drifts between houses. Dogs, or half-wild camp companions if you prefer the cautious phrase, nose around the edges of discarded scraps. Children chase one another, then stop to stare at the visitors with open curiosity. Adults pretend to be more dignified about their own curiosity, with mixed results. Evening brings the familiar return to firelight. But now there are several fires, each holding its own small circle of talk. The same story changes as it moves. At one hearth, the visitor's journey becomes longer. At another, the traded blade becomes finer. At another, someone's bargaining skill receives admiration, or mild teasing, which may be more valuable. You sit where you can hear the layered murmurs. This is the ancient trait in a busier world. People still shape experience into story, but now story travels through networks. It carries value, judgment, warning, humour, and belonging. It tells the village who matters, what happened, what changed, and what might happen next. The stars appear above the roofs. Firelight glows in doorways, somewhere. A bead cord clicks softly as it is lifted and admired. Somewhere else, a name is spoken in a low voice, and three people lean closer. You feel how civilization grows not only from tools and food, but from talk. The village sleeps inside its web of murmurs, and the old human habit keeps weaving. The murmurs of the village carry you forward, and slowly the world grows older again. The fires remain, the voices remain, the desire to remember remains. But something new begins to appear beneath human hands. Clay is smoothed into flat surfaces. Reeds are cut to make marks. Symbols begin to stand where voices once had to do all the work alone. You are moving toward the first scribes, those patient keepers of Maori who taught thought to rest on tablets. You arrive in a riverland where the air is warmer and heavier than the cool valleys behind you. Mud brick buildings rise from the ground in soft brown shapes. Narrow lanes wind between walls, the smell of wet clay. Animals, smoke, grain, and river water mingles in the morning air. People move with baskets, jars, and bundles. There are fields nearby, storehouses, workshops, temples. and officials with the ancient expression of people who have discovered paperwork and intend to make it everyone else's problem. This is no longer the Deep Ice Age. You're in the world of early cities, where farming, irrigation, trade, and administration have made life larger and more complicated. In Mesopotamia, writing developed by the late 4th millennium BCE, first used heavily for practical records such as grain, livestock, labour, and goods. The earlier signs were not bedtime poetry or grand royal confessions. They were accounts, lists, quantities, civilization. In one of its most charming jokes, appears to have written receipts before novels. You step into a shaded room where a scribe sits with a lump of damp clay. The room is cool compared with the bright street outside. Dust hangs in the light near the doorway. A reed stylus rests in the scribe's hand. With small practiced movements, they press wedge-shaped marks into the clay. Each mark is brief, firm and angled. The tablet holds the pressure like soft earth holding footprints. The sound is delicate. Press, lift, turn, press again. The marks do not look like speech to you at first. They seem more like bird tracks crossing mud. But to the trained eye, they hold information. Measures of barley, names of workers, deliveries of oil, counts of sheep, the ordinary machinery of a city, caught before it can vanish into argument. You think back to the cave wall, the handprint, the carved pendant. Those signs carried presence, identity, memory, and perhaps mystery. Writing changes the game. It lets information travel without the speaker. It lets a voice become portable, silent, and stubborn. A spoken promise depends on witnesses. A written record can sit on a shelf and quietly ruin someone's excuse months later. The scribe works with a calm concentration. Their fingers are stained with clay. Their clothes smell faintly of dust and smoke. Outside, donkeys bray, people call out, and a cartwheel bumps over uneven ground. Inside, the tablet grows more crowded. This is memory becoming official. There is a strange softness to clay writing. Before firing, a tablet can be reshaped, erased, or reused. Some tablets were baked hard, intentionally or by accidental fires, allowing them to survive for thousands of years. An accidental building fire could preserve a set of records that no one meant to make immortal. History has a dry sense of humour. A disaster for the office becomes a gift for archaeologists. The role of early writing still invites careful disagreement. Some researchers see it mainly as a tool of administration, born from the need to manage surplus, labour, and exchange. Others emphasize its connection with temples, authority, and elite control, till others point out that once symbols existed, people began expanding them into law, literature, letters, prayers, and stories. Writing may have entered the world through accounting, but it did not remain politely in the storage room. You follow the scribe later through a courtyard. Sunlight reflects from pale walls. A servant carries jars sealed with clay. A merchant waits beside a bundle of goods. A temple official speaks to another man whose expression suggests mild concern about numbers. The scribe listens, then marks another tablet. In this world. Memory is not only shared around firelight, it is counted, stored, checked, and sometimes used against you. Cozy, not always, important, very. Yet even here, the old human trait survives. The tablet is practical, but it is also narrative in seed form. It says something happened. Someone brought grain, someone received wool, someone owed labour. Time now has little anchors placed inside it. A record turns fleeting action into a lasting statement. You enter another room where older tablets are kept. They rest in baskets or on shelves. Some are small enough to fit in the palm. Others are larger and heavier. The air smells of dry clay and reeds. You feel the quiet weight of accumulated remembering. Not remembering as a song or a myth, but remembering as a system. And then, among records, another kind of text begins to emerge. Stories, hymns, royal inscriptions, wisdom sayings, lists of signs for students to copy. The scribe's school is nearby. Young learners press marks into clay, repeating forms until their hands obey. You watch a student make an uneven wedge, then smooth the clay with visible frustration. Their teacher corrects the angle. Some things from the children around the Ice Age fire return here in a new form. Watch, copy, fail, try again. Learning still enters through the hand. A small, delightful detail from scribal education is that some ancient school tablets preserve practice exercises, mistakes, corrections, and even traces of student struggle. The tablet may look grand in a museum, but once it was homework, somewhere. A tired student pressed signs into clay and perhaps wondered why the universe required so many lists. Across the centuries, that feeling remains painfully understandable. You stand in the doorway as the students repeat signs. Their voices rise and fall softly. The marks are no longer pictures alone. They have become a system that trained people can read. This gives certain humans special power. Not everyone can write. Not everyone can read. A scribe becomes a keeper of memory, a mediator between speech and record. You may wonder what was lost when memory moved into writing. The question is gentle but important. A written tablet can preserve words, but it cannot preserve the whole file it's seen. It cannot fully hold the elder's pause. The child's sleepy face, the smell of snow on fur, the laugh that changed a warning into something unforgettable. Writing saves some things by flattening others. It makes memory durable, but less warm. Many students of ancient culture have wrestled with this tension. Oral tradition can be flexible, alive, and communal. Written tradition can be stable, portable, and powerful. Neither simply replaces the other. For a very long time, they overlap. People continue telling stories aloud even after writing appears. A tablet may hold a tale, but a human voice still wakes it. As evening settles over the city, you step outside. The river glows under fading light. Workers return from fields. Smoke rises from rooftops. Somewhere, a scribe sets a tablet aside to dry. Somewhere else, a family gathers around a meal, and someone begins to tell what happened that day. The world has changed greatly since the handprint in the cave, but the old need is still here, to mark. To remember, to pass meaning beyond the moment. Clay tablets do not end the ancient human trait. They give it another body. The firelit voice has found a place in mud, reed, and careful hands, and as darkness settles over the city, the first written memories sleep quietly on the shelves, waiting for future eyes to wake them. The clay tablets rest behind you as the city grows taller in memory. You move onward through time, following the old trait into places where walls rise high, courtyards widen, and power gathers itself under painted ceilings. The human need to tell, mark, remember, and belong has not vanished into records. It has climbed into palaces and temples where stories become larger, more polished, and rather better dressed. You arrive in an ancient city at dusk. The air is warm, dusty, and scented with incense, river mud, cooked grain, and oil lamps. Shadows stretch across stone steps. A procession moves slowly toward a temple gate, carrying offerings in bowls and baskets. Priests in clean garments pass beneath carved reliefs. Officials walk with careful dignity, the kind of dignity that suggests their sandals are uncomfortable but their status is excellent. Before stepping into the temple space, you pause to understand this world. As cities and kingdoms grew, rulers and religious leaders began using myth, ceremony, and written memory to hold communities together. In Egypt, Mesopotamia, the Indus region, China, Mesoamerica, and many other places. Sacred stories and royal claims helped explain why the world had order, why certain people ruled, and why certain rituals mattered. Stories no longer belonged only to the household fire. They now helped support entire societies. You walk beneath an entrance where carved figures line the walls. Gods, animals, kings, servants, stars, rivers, and strange blended beings appear in stone and paint. The images are not random decoration. They teach without needing everyone to read. A farmer entering this space may not understand every symbol, but the message is clear. The world has structure. The temple stands at its center. The ruler belongs somewhere within that structure, usually quite near the top, which is convenient for the ruler. Inside, the air cools slightly. Incense curls upward in pale streams. Oil lamps flicker against columns. Footsteps echo softly. A priest speaks in a low voice, and the sound seems to gather under the roof. Around you, people move slowly, carrying bread, beer, flowers, or small objects. Their faces are serious, but not frightened. Ritual has made the space familiar. You have seen this before. In a much older form, the cave chamber, the red pigment, the shared hush. Now the setting is grander, with more stonework and probably more administrators, but the deep pattern remains. People enter a special place, repeat special gestures, and let the group hold emotions that are too large for ordinary life. A well-known feature of many early civilizations is that rulers often link themselves to divine favor or cosmic order. Egyptian pharaohs, for example, were connected with the maintenance of Ma'at, the principle of balance and order. Mesopotamian kings presented themselves as chosen or supported by gods. Such ideas were not merely abstract beliefs, they helped organize labor, law, taxation, warfare, festivals, and the everyday obedience that large states required. You pass a painted wall where a king is shown larger than everyone around him. This visual trick appears in many cultures. Important figures are made physically bigger in art, which is not anatomically honest, but symbolically efficient. One glance tells the viewer who matters most. Ancient propaganda, it turns out, did not need a comment section. Nearby, a scribe reads from a tablet or scroll. His voice is clear and trained. The story he recites may describe a god who shaped the world, a hero who crossed dangerous lands, or a king whose victories have been polished smooth by official memory. The listeners stand quietly. Some know the tale already. Some have heard it at festivals since childhood. Familiarity does not weaken it. Repetition makes it stronger. This is myth serving power, but it is also myth serving comfort. To live in a city is to live among strangers. A shared sacred story gives strangers a common sky. It tells them why the river floods, why the seasons return, why the dead are honoured, why the temple receives offerings, why the ruler commands, and why tomorrow should resemble today rather than dissolve into chaos. Of course, modern researchers do not all explain these temple myths in the same way. One school of thought emphasizes political control, seeing official stories as tools of kings and elites. Another highlights sincere religious experience and the emotional power of ritual. A third approach looks at performance, suggesting that festivals, songs, images, and processions created belonging through the body as much as through belief. These views overlap more than they quarrel. A story can comfort the poor, strengthen the ruler, and organize the calendar all at once. Ancient stories were apparently very busy. You follow the procession into a courtyard lit by lamps. The stones under your feet still hold the day's warmth. Musicians begin to play soft drums and pipes. The rhythm is slow, repeating, steady enough to guide footsteps. People gather around the edges. Children are lifted for a better view. An old woman murmurs a phrase before touching her forehead. A young man holds a basket of offerings with great seriousness, probably hoping not to drop anything in front of everyone, an ambition shared across all centuries. The scent of incense thickens. The priest lifts a vessel. The crowd grows still. For a moment, the entire city seems to breathe together. This is the old trait at its most public. Shared imagination has become civic architecture. It lives in images, chants, costumes, calendars, sacred meals, public festivals, and royal inscriptions carved so deeply they seem to insist on eternity. A curious survival from several ancient societies is how often rulers tried to control memory by changing inscriptions, erasing names, or replacing older monuments with their own. In Egypt, some names were chiseled away. In Mesopotamia, kings buried foundation deposits under buildings to speak to future rulers or gods. The desire to be remembered did not remain humble for long. A handprint on a cave wall quietly says, "I was here." A royal monument says something closer to, "I was here, and please admire the scale of my here." You smile gently at the thought, but the feeling beneath it is serious. Power wants stories because stories outlive the day. A ruler can command workers, but a story can command grandchildren. A temple can store grain, but a myth can store meaning. A law can punish, but a sacred tale can make obedience feel woven into the universe. As night deepens, the ceremony softens, people begin to drift away. The courtyard fills with quieter conversation. A child asks why the god carries a certain symbol. An adult answers with a tale. There it is again, the ancient method, alive beneath the grand stone. Explain the world by telling someone how it came to be. You leave the temple and pass toward the palace district. Guards stand near a gate. Inside, walls are painted with scenes of tribute, hunting, victory, and abundance. The palace tells its own stories, not always gentle ones, but tonight you observe them calmly, as images of how societies remember power. The king is shown receiving goods from distant lands. Musicians play, servants carry cups. Lions, bulls, lotus flowers, stars, boats, mountains, and enemies all become part of the official picture. Nothing here is accidental. Every image says, "This world is ordered." Every carved line says, "Remember it this way." Yet outside the palace, ordinary people return to homes, courtyards, roofs, and small fires. They carry official myths with them, but also their own household stories. A mother tells a child about a festival. A worker complains softly about an overseer. A grandmother repeats an older tale that may never appear on a temple wall. Human memory remains layered. Power can shape it, but not fully own it. The lamps burn lower. The streets smell of cooling stone, smoke, and night air. Somewhere behind you, a priest closes a door. Somewhere ahead, a family laughs over a meal. Above the city, stars emerge, watched now through the frame of walls and towers. You understand that the secret trait has changed clothes again. It began beside firelight, it touched cave walls, it entered beads, myths, villages, markets, tablets. Now it stands in palaces and temples, helping whole societies imagine themselves into order. And as you walk through the sleeping city, you feel the same quiet question beneath every carved god and royal name. How can a human life, so brief and warm and flickering, be held inside a story large enough to last? You leave the temple city with its carved gods and royal names, and the road of time carries you into quieter rooms. The stone walls become timber frames. The palace courtyard becomes a village lane. The polished ritual becomes a song hummed while bread bakes. You are no longer standing beneath towering columns. You're stepping into ordinary homes, where the ancient trait lives without needing permission from kings. The evening is cool, rain has passed recently, leaving the ground damp and dark. You smell wet earth, wood smoke, wool, onions, stale straw, and the warm sourness of animals kept close to human shelter. A village lies under a low sky. Roofs are thatched or tiled, depending on the region your path touches, and smoke curls from small openings. A dog barks once, then decides this is too much effort and goes back to being horizontal. You enter a house where the floor is packed earth and the air is dim with firelight. The hearth sits near the centre of domestic life. Pots hang nearby. A wooden bench creaks as someone shifts their weight. Wool cloth hangs to dry. A child sits with knees tucked under a rough blanket. Watching an older woman spin thread, the spindle turns and drops, twisting fibre into yarn with a motion as old as patience. By the medieval and early modern periods, most people still lived in rural communities and worked close to home. Fields, animals, and seasonal labour. Literacy varied widely by region. Class, gender, and time. Many stories remained oral, carried through songs, sermons, gossip, lullabies, festivals, work chants, and fireside tales. Books existed, and in some places they grew more common. But for many households, the voice remained the most familiar library. The old woman begins speaking. At first, it seems as like ordinary talk, a warning about weather, a memory of a hard winter, a comment about a neighbour's cow, which appears to have opinions and little respect for fences. Then the words begin to shape themselves into a tale. The children notice first. Their bodies become still. Someone near the hearth smiles because the story is known. You sit near the fire and feel heat through your clothing. Smoke curls upward and clings to the rafters. The flames shine on wooden bowls, iron tools, and faces lined by work. Outside, rainwater drips from the eaves. Inside, the story opens like a door. It may be about a clever girl who outwits danger. It may be about a traveller who enters the forest after dark. It may be about saints, spirits, fairies, giants, wolves, witches, ancestors, or foolish rich men, always a dependable category. These stories were not only entertainment, they carried advice about generosity, caution, obedience, bravery, hunger, marriage, work, and the uncertain edges of the known world. A forest in a tale was rarely just a forest. It was a place where ordinary rules became thin. A crossroads was not merely a crossing of paths, it was a place of choices. A stranger at the door might be danger, blessing, test, or all three, which is why hospitality has always required both kindness and common sense. Those who study folklore often disagree about how old particular tale types really are. Some stories recorded in recent centuries may preserve very ancient motifs, while others change so much through retelling that their origins are impossible to trace with confidence. A tale written down in the 19th century may carry echoes of the Middle Ages, or even older patterns, but echoes are not the same as proof. Still, the persistence of repeated themes suggests that certain human concerns remain stubbornly attached to story. The children listen as the old woman's voice lowers. A log cracks in the hearth. The room smells of damp wool and simmering stew. Someone mends a sleeve with small neat stitches. Someone else sharpens a knife slowly. Not for drama, just because tomorrow includes turnips and turnips must be persuaded. The domestic world is full of small tasks, and stories fit into them beautifully. They require no empty hands, they travel while spinning, weaving, cooking, nursing, repairing, and waiting. A curious detail from household storytelling is that many tales were not told in fixed, polished versions. They changed with the teller. A grandmother might add local names. A father might shorten the frightening parts for a sleepy child, or lengthen them because apparently some fathers enjoy chaos. A storyteller could adjust humour, danger, and moral lesson depending on the listeners. The story lived because it was flexible. You notice how the tale binds the room. The youngest child follows the images. The older children learn the warnings beneath them. The adults enjoy the familiar turns. The elder holds authority not by decree, but by memory. This is not so different from the Ice Age fire. The walls are different. The tools are different. There may be iron, pottery, looms, fields, church bells, markets, and taxes now, because history does enjoy adding paperwork. But the pattern remains. Night comes, work slows, people gather around warmth. A voice turns experience into meaning. Beyond the house, the village has its own larger calendar of stories. Winter festivals, harvest customs, saints' days, wedding songs, funeral laments, seasonal rituals that mix official religion with older local habits in ways that make tidy categories quietly give up. People bless fields, light fires, hang greenery, tell tales of wandering spirits, and remember the dead. A sermon in the church may meet a whispered story by the hearth, and both shape how people understand the world. Not every story is gentle. Of course, some warn children away from rivers, wells, strangers, or deep woods. Some explain illness or misfortune in ways modern listeners may find unfair or fearful. But even these tales show the same ancient impulse. When life feels uncertain, humans give uncertainty a face, a name, a plot, and sometimes a hat. The old woman reaches the part of the story everyone knows. The children lean forward. The adults pretend not to be equally interested. Her hand rises, casting a shadow across the wall. For a moment, the shadow looks like a crooked branch, or a bird, or a person waiting at the edge of a road. You remember the cave fire, the flickering animal paintings, the elder's hand making antlers on some stone. The connection is quiet and perfect. The oldest technologies are still here. Voice, fire, gesture, memory. The story ends without applause. It simply settles. Someone stirs the pot, someone adds more wood. The rain outside softens into mist. The children repeat a phrase from the tale under their breath, testing its shape. Tomorrow, one of them may tell it badly to another child. Years later, perhaps better. One day, perhaps with new details and an old rhythm. You step back toward the doorway and look into the village lane. Lamps glow in other homes, in each one. People may be singing, talking, praying, arguing, laughing, or telling some version of how the world works. The great temple myths have not disappeared. But here, among wooden cups and smoky rafters, stories are smaller and closer to the skin. And as night folds over the village, you understand that the ancient human trait never needed grandeur to survive. It only needed a warm place, a listening mind, and someone willing to begin, softly, with what happened once, long ago. The smoky village room softens behind you, and the road of time carries you toward a world of paper, ink, presses, and pages. The hearth is still there in many homes. The evening voice still matters, but now stories begin to multiply faster than any one storyteller can carry them. They leave the mouth, enter the page, and travel in bundles across towns, roads, ports, classrooms, parlours, and quiet bedsides. You step into an early modern street just after rain. The stones shine faintly under grey light. Wheels clatter over puddles, horses snort steam into the cool air. Shop signs creak above narrow doorways. The smell is thick with wet wood, chimney smoke, leather, horse dung, fresh bread, and ink from a print shop nearby. This is not exactly a scented candle experience, but it is alive. Inside the print shop, the air is warmer. Paper lies stacked on a table. Metal type rests in small compartments, each tiny letter waiting to become part of someone's thought. A press stands in the room like a sturdy wooden creature. Workers move with practiced rhythm. Ink is spread. Paper is placed. The frame lowers. Pressure is applied. A page is lifted. Black letters shining wet for a moment before they dry. The printing press transformed communication in Europe after the mid-15th century, especially after the work of Johannes Gutenberg and other printers. Books became easier to reproduce than hand-copied manuscripts, though they were not instantly cheap for everyone, over time. Printed pages helped spread religious arguments. Scientific ideas, political rumours, ballads, practical guides, newspapers, and novels. The human trait did not become new, it became faster. You watch a sheet emerge from the press. It contains words that hundreds, perhaps thousands, of people may read. A single voice has become many quiet voices. This change is gentle and enormous at once. Before print, a story could travel far, but it had to pass through memory, handwriting, performance, or slow copying. After print, stories could repeat themselves with unusual accuracy. The same sentence could appear in many towns. The same pamphlet could provoke laughter in one kitchen and alarm in another. The same book could sit beside a candle and speak to someone who had never met its author. Of course, not everyone was delighted. New media have always inspired concern, which is comforting in a slightly ridiculous way. Some authorities worried that printed material would spread error, heresy, sedition, or plain foolishness. They were not entirely wrong. The press carried wisdom and nonsense with equal mechanical patience, a trait later technologies would also inherit enthusiastically. You follow a boy carrying folded sheets through the street. He calls out news, though the exact form depends on time and place. Broadsides, pamphlets, and early newspapers bring reports of wars, disasters, court scandals, strange animals, miraculous signs, crimes, sermons, and markets. People gather to listen, buy, argue, or simply enjoy having something fresh to discuss. News becomes a shared appetite. Coffee houses, taverns, workshops, and domestic rooms become places where printed words return to speech. A man reads aloud to others who cannot read or who simply prefer listening. A woman borrows a chapbook and brings it home. A child traces letters with a finger. Someone mispronounces a foreign name with great confidence. The page does not silence the voice, it feeds it. People who study print culture often weigh different explanations for its impact. Some emphasize the spread of literacy and religious reform. Others focus on commerce, politics, censorship, or the growth of public opinion. Another approach looks at private reading, the new inwardness created when people could sit alone with a book and hear a voice inside the mind. These explanations do not cancel one another. Print was not one revolution, it was many small revolutions wearing the same ink stains. You enter a modest home in the evening. The room is lit by candles rather than only firelight. Their flames are smaller and steadier than the old hearth, casting yellow pools on wooden furniture. The smell of wax, smoke, stew, and damp clothing fills the air. On a table lies a book, its pages slightly curled from use. Someone lifts it carefully, as if the object deserves respect. The family gathers, the reading begins. The voice is slower than conversation, shaped by the sentences already arranged on the page. A story unfolds about travel, danger, virtue, romance, misfortune, or some poor character making choices so obviously bad that listeners across centuries can bond over judging them. The readers and listeners react together. A sigh, a laugh, a raised eyebrow, the old social fare is still present. Only now paper has joined the circle. Novels became increasingly popular in the 18th and 19th centuries, offering readers long, immersive stories about ordinary life. Feeling, society, and moral choice. This was not just entertainment. It trained people to inhabit other minds for hours at a time. You could live inside a character's hope, embarrassment, desire, fear, or regret while sitting safely in a chair. A very efficient arrangement, really, emotional travel with minimal mud. A pleasing detail from the history of reading is that people often read aloud well into the modern period. Silent, private reading existed, of course, but family readings, public readings, and serialized fiction shared in groups were common. When novels appeared in installments, readers sometimes waited eagerly for the next part, proving that cliffhanger suffering existed long before streaming services asked whether you were still watching. You sit near the candle while the story continues. Outside, Rain begins again, tapping softly against the window. The room grows warmer. Someone leans back in a chair. Someone stitches by candlelight, the needle flashing briefly. A child fights sleep and loses with dignity. The printed book has become a bedtime voice. You notice how different this feels from the cave, and how similar. The cave wall held images in darkness, the tablet held accounts in clay, the village hearth held tales in memory. Now the page holds imagined lives. Each form changes the old trait, but none replaces it. Humans still seek pattern, feeling, identity, and belonging. They still ask stories to explain the world and soften the night. Printed news widens the circle even more. A person in one town may read of a battle far away, a shipwreck across the sea, a royal death, a comet, a new invention, or a crime in a city they will never visit. The world grows larger inside the mind. Strangers become characters, distant events become topics at breakfast. Human imagination stretches along roads and postal routes. This widening brings a comfort and unease. More stories mean more connection, but also more noise. People worry about false reports, moral panic, sensational tales, and readers becoming too absorbed in fiction. Every age suspects the next page may ruin civilization, and yet people keep reading, because the hunger is older than the complaint. By night, the print shop has gone quiet. The press rests. Ink dries on pages. Bundles wait to be carried away at dawn. In homes across the town, candles burn beside books and papers. Some readers learn, some escape, some argue, some weep softly over people who never existed, which is one of humanity's most impressive and unnecessary talents. You stand by the window as rain blurs the street. The old trait has found ink. It has entered newspapers, novels, pamphlets, letters, and little books tucked beneath pillows. It moves from hand to hand, from eye to mind, from page back into voice, and as the candle lowers beside the open book, you understand that print did not end the ancient fireside story. It simply gave the fire more rooms, more nights, and more listeners than ever before. The candle beside the printed book lowers, and time carries you forward once more, into a glow that does not flicker like flame. It shines from glass. It waits in pockets, on bedside tables, in palms, on walls, in trains, in kitchens, and in dark bedrooms where people promise they will look at only one more thing. A promise that has been breaking quietly across the planet for years. You arrive in the present night. The room is dim. Outside, traffic hums like distant water. A refrigerator clicks in another room. Rain taps softly against a window. Or perhaps it is only the wind moving through leaves. On the bedside table, a phone screen lights up with a small, silent glow. The air smells faintly of clean sheets, dust, warm electronics, and the last trace of tea cooling in a cup. You pick up the phone. A whole village of voices wakes in your hand. Messages, photographs, videos, news, arguments, songs, memories, jokes, people eating breakfast in another country, someone explaining ancient pottery with great seriousness, someone else filming a cat behaving like a minor household dictator. The range is absurd, intimate, and very human. To understand this moment, you have to see how quickly the old trait has expanded in the last few decades. Digital technology has changed how stories, images, rumours, and identities move through daily life. The internet, smartphones, social media platforms, and streaming services allow billions of people to share and receive information at speeds earlier societies could barely imagine. A cave painting waited in darkness. A printed book travelled by hand. A post can cross the world before your tea is properly cool. And yet the core appetite is ancient. You still look for patterns. You still follow faces. You still care who belongs to which group. You still turn events into stories. You still want to know what happened, what it means, and whether anyone else felt it too. The screen scrolls beneath your thumb. Each image appears, holds your attention briefly, then disappears upward into the soft nowhere of the feed. A person speaks directly into a camera, telling a story from their life. Another shares a memory of a grandparent. Another recreates a historical meal. Another warns of danger. Another offers comfort to strangers they will never meet. This is the fireside circle stretched across the planet. It is also, admittedly, a circle where everyone talks at once. Modern platforms use algorithms to choose what you see, often based on past attention. If you pause on a video, like a post, or watch something twice, the system learns a little more about what might keep you there. The result can feel strangely personal, as if the glowing object knows your moods. It does not know you like a friend. Of course, it knows patterns in behaviour, which is powerful, useful, and faintly unsettling in the way a raccoon opening a door is unsettling. People who study digital culture describe this new world in many ways. Some emphasise connection, creativity, and access to knowledge. Others focus on distraction, misinformation, loneliness, or the way attention becomes a product. Another view sees the internet as a vast extension of older social habits. Not a break from human nature, but an amplification of it. The tool is new, the hunger is not. You scroll past a short video of a prehistoric cave. The painted animals appear on your screen, lit by careful museum lights. You remember standing before similar walls in deep darkness. The image is now compressed into pixels, travelling through cables, satellites, servers, and glass. The cave has entered the phone. The torch has become a backlight. The ancient handprint now receives comments, some thoughtful, some confused, and at least one probably asking why no one built it in high definition. A strange little detail of modern life is that people now leave digital traces constantly, often without thinking of them as records. A location tag, a message, a search, a photo, a reaction, a half-written post abandoned at midnight. Future historians may know more about ordinary lives than ever before, and still understand less if the flood becomes too large to read meaningfully. Abundance can hide things as effectively as silence. You set the phone down for a moment. The room becomes quieter. The glow fades, and your eyes adjust to darkness. You hear the old sounds again beneath the modern ones. Breath, rain, the creak of a floor, the far murmur of other lives. Your own mind continues the scrolling without the screen, offering fragments of what you saw. A face, a headline, a joke, a warning, a memory, a question. This is where the old trait becomes complicated. For 30,000 years, stories helped humans survive, bond, teach, and sleep. But a feed does not always know when a mind needs rest. It can keep offering new fragments, each one shaped to catch attention. The ancient pattern-seeking brain, once watching animal tracks and fire shadows, now watches notifications. It still asks, what does this mean? Who is speaking? Is there danger? Is there belonging? Should I keep looking? And the phone, being deeply unhelpful in a very polished way, keeps saying yes. Still, the story is not only anxious, there is tenderness here too. A person alone at night can hear a calming voice. A family separated by oceans can share a child's first steps. Lost languages can be recorded. Old photographs can be restored. History lessons can reach people who might never enter a museum. A lullaby can travel. A memory can be saved. A stranger can say, I felt that too. You open a video, and a quiet narrator begins describing an ancient village by firelight. The voice is slow, warm, familiar. You smile a little because the circle is folded back on itself. The technology is modern, but the feeling is old. You're still beside the fire, in a way, still listening to someone turn time into a path you can walk while the night gathers softly around you. The screen shows images of stone tools, Painted caves, old houses, printed pages, city ruins. Each one is part of the journey you have taken. The video does what humans have always done. It selects, arranges, softens, explains. It gives the restless mind a shape to follow. Outside, the rain continues. Inside, the room glows gently. You think about the ancient hand pressed to stone, the shell bead carried far inland, the child listening by the hearth, the scribe pressing marks into clay, the printer lifting wet paper from the press. Each was a way of sending the self outward. Each was a way of saying, remember this, notice this, carry this onward. Now the gesture is a tap, a post, a message, a saved photograph, a voice through headphones in the dark. The old trait remains. It has become faster, brighter, louder, and sometimes more tiring. But beneath the noise, it is still the same human wish, to be seen, to understand, to belong inside a shared story. You turn the screen face down, the room darkens again, for a moment. There is only your breathing and the soft weather outside, and in that darkness, the ancient fire seems to return, not as flame, but as attention itself, glowing quietly wherever one human mind reaches toward another. The darkened room around you becomes quiet, and the phone no longer glows. In that small pause, time folds gently back upon itself. The rain outside begins to sound like the dripping water inside the cave. The soft warmth of the bed becomes the warmth of animal skins near a fire. The faint light at the window becomes starlight over an ancient plain. You have travelled far, but the path has been circular all along. You return to the fire. It is night again, somewhere near the beginning of the journey. The air is cold and clean. Smoke rises through darkness. Around you, a small group of early humans sits close together, their faces lit by flame. A child sleeps against an adult's side. Someone shapes a tool in the low light. Someone touches a pendant at their throat. Someone watches the dark beyond the circle and listens. Now, after walking through caves, villages, temples, homes, print shops, and screens, you can see the trait more clearly. It is not only storytelling, it is the human need to make meaning together. That need appeared in painted animals, in handprints, in shared meals, in ritual gestures, in children learning by firelight, in shells carried across landscapes, in myths about rivers and birds, in village gossip, in clay tablets, in royal monuments, in printed pages, and in digital voices speaking softly through the night. Human beings are meaning makers. You notice patterns. You give events shape. You remember the people you love. You worry about how others see you. You leave marks. You collect objects. You tell stories about where you came from and where you might go next. This habit is ancient enough to feel like instinct, and flexible enough to suit of nearly every world humans have built. A steady fact runs through the whole journey. Long before written history, Homo sapiens were already creating symbolic objects, painting caves, using pigments, making ornaments, and passing knowledge through social learning. These traces do not give every answer, but they show that early humans were not merely surviving in a mechanical way. They were imagining, communicating, marking, and remembering. The remaining questions are quieter than simple certainty. Researchers differ over how to interpret the deepest signs of symbolic life. Was cave art mostly ritual, teaching, memory, performance, or something else? Did myths grow first from survival lessons, dreams, grief, animal encounters, or social bonding? No single answer rests comfortably over all the evidence. The old world resists tidy labels, as old worlds often do. But perhaps that is fitting. The trait itself is not tidy. It moves like smoke. It changes shape depending on the room. You watch the firelight move over the ancient faces. One person begins to speak, and the others listen. You cannot know the words, but you know the posture, the lifted head, the stillness, the little turn of attention toward a voice. The moment when a group agrees, silently, that this matters. A small detail returns to you from the cave. The handprint was made by painting around the hand, leaving absence behind. What survived was not the flesh itself, but the space where flesh once blocked the red dust. That is strangely like memory. Most of the living moment disappears. The warmth, the breath, the exact voice, the small private thoughts all vanish. What remains is an outline, a story, a mark left where life once pressed against the world. You feel the cold at your back and the warmth on your face. The fire snaps softly. Above, stars shine with impossible patience. You think of all the people who came after this circle. Farmers grinding seeds, traders exchanging shells and gossip, scribes pressing marks into clay, priests lifting lamps, grandmothers telling tales beside smoky hearths, printers stacking pages, readers turning them by candlelight, modern listeners resting in bed with a voice in their ears, different tools, same longing to understand, to belong, to be remembered, to send a little light forward. And yes, sometimes this trait makes humans strange. You see faces in clouds, you keep objects nobody else understands. You remember a sentence someone said years ago while forgetting why you entered the kitchen. You turn awkward moments into stories, polish old memories until they shine differently, and occasionally believe your own dramatic retelling a little too much. But even that is human. Meaning is not always accurate in every detail. Sometimes this is how the heart carries what the mind cannot file neatly away. The group by the fire shares food. The smell is smoky, warm, rich, and earthy. A child wakes briefly, hears the familiar voice, and drifts back down. Someone laughs softly. Someone else looks toward the cave mouth, where the painted animals wait in darkness. The world outside is still difficult. Cold remains, hunger remains, danger remains, but the circle holds. That is the old comfort. Not that life is easy, not that every mystery is solved, but that humans gather, notice, remember, and speak. The secret trait that began so long ago still exists because it answers something deep. It helps a mind feel less alone inside a vast world. It turns fear into warning, beauty into art, grief into ritual, survival into memory, and memory into story. It lets one life touch another across space, across generations, across the enormous quiet of time. You look once more at the ancient handprints in your mind. You look at the beads, the cave animals, the clay tablets, the printed books, the glowing screens. Each one says in its own way, someone was here, someone cared enough to mark the world, someone hoped another person would understand. The fire burns lower now. The flames shrink into red and gold, then settle into embers. The group grows still. The speaker's voice softens until it is almost part of the night itself. Smoke drifts upward. The stars remain, and you understand, gently, that the story has not ended. It has only reached you. You are part of the same long human habit. Every memory you keep, every comforting story you return to, every message you send into the dark, every small object you save because it means something, belongs to that ancient line. The fire is old, the night is old, the need is old, and still, quietly, it lives in you. Word count 1165. The fire has almost gone out now, and the world around it becomes soft at the edges. The cold night no longer feels sharp. It simply rests beyond the circle, patient and distant. A thin thread of smoke rises into the dark, carrying the last scent of ash and warm wood toward the stars. You do not need to follow the path any farther tonight. The caves can sleep in minutes. The villagers can settle beneath their roofs. The scribes can leave their tablets to dry. The printed pages can close. The screens can dim. Everything you have seen remains quietly in place, like small lights along a road you've already walked. The hand on the cave wall waits in red dust. The child by the hearth dreams under a rough blanket. The river moves under moonlight. The old stories continue somewhere beyond hearing. But they no longer ask anything from you. You can let them drift now, slowly, gently, like snow falling through darkness. The human story is wide, but tonight it has become simple. People lived, they listened, they loved. They feared the dark and softened it with voices. They left marks so others would know they had passed through. And now, here you are, resting inside the same long chain of memory. Your breathing can slow, your thoughts can loosen. The ancient fire becomes only a glow. The glow becomes only warmth. Thus, the warmth becomes only quiet. Outside, the night gathers itself around the sleeping world. Above it all, the stars shine calmly, as they did 30,000 years ago, as they will after this story fades. Nothing needs to be solved now. Nothing needs to be held tightly. The story can rest, and so can you. Now, as the last embers settle into a soft red glow, you can allow this long journey through time to come gently to rest. There is nothing more to discover tonight. The ancient cave grows quiet once again. The painted animals wait patiently in the darkness. The river continues its endless journey beneath the stars. Somewhere beyond the hills, the first people who ever gathered around a fire have long since fallen asleep. Yet the warmth of their stories still lingers in the world. You have walked beside them through frozen valleys, silent forests, smoky villages, bustling cities, quiet homes, and finally into the modern night. Across 30,000 years, almost everything changed. Tools became machines, fires became electric lights, clay tablets became books, and books became glowing screens. Yet one quiet part of being human remained almost unaided. The desire to share a story, the hope that someone else will understand, the comfort of sitting together, even if separated by thousands of years. Perhaps that has always been our oldest inheritance. Not stone tools, not great monuments, not kingdoms or inventions, but the simple ability to give meaning to our lives and pass that meaning gently to another person. Now the night becomes softer. Your thoughts can drift as slowly as smoke rising into the cool air. The stars above remain exactly where countless generations once found them, shining over every storyteller, every listener, every child, every traveller, and every dreamer who looked upward before closing their eyes. So let the ancient fire fade into darkness, let the voices become distant, let the footsteps disappear into the soft earth, and let history, for just this one peaceful night, become a quiet place where your own mind can finally rest. Sleep well, and may those same timeless stars watch peacefully over you until morning. Sweet dreams.